Hi, everybody. Hopefully, this is working out. Hi. I'm not sure if people can hear me. The very beginning of the stream was a little bit strange for me. So, can people hear me? Just let me know if you can hear me before I start. Okay, I haven't seen any comments yet of being able to hear me. So, I'll just wait like a second or so just to make sure. Hi. I see people in the comments. Okay, great. So I'll just get started. And for those who are new to all things Iceland, I'm the creator. My name is Jules. I'm an expat that has been living in the country for almost 5 years. So in June will be my 5 year anniversary, which is pretty exciting. And I thought it would be helpful, even though I've made some videos already about what it's like to live in Iceland, live and work in Iceland, that it would be helpful to just do a Q&A because there's so many questions that people have that I've never thought of before. And I don't want to assume, what people might be thinking. So I'm really happy and I'm really grateful for all the people that decided to send in questions. I have so many. And actually over here, so to my left, which is probably your right, I have my phone, which has like a bunch of questions on them. So just FYI, if I look over here, that's what I'm looking at. And then, of course, if I look down, it will be that I'm looking at the chat. So hi to everybody. I see people from different places, New York City, people from Maryland, super excited, Indiana. So thank you so much for joining. And to make it a little bit more organized too, I have made categories of the different things that I'm going to talk about. So I'm basically have put it into categories such as settling into life here, and my status, like meeting my status in the country and permits and all that other jazz, visas, working in Iceland, learning Icelandic, many questions about that, friends and family, and of course many people asked about, how to make friends here and me feeling like am part of Iceland in that way, meaning having community and being Black in Iceland, winter in Iceland, food, housing slash cost of living. Hi, all the way from Chile. Hi. My hair, about Icelanders in general, and miscellaneous. And the reason why I'm saying that is because as I go through all of the questions, you will then see that, as I'm going through all the categories, what I'm trying to say is that might have questions, but if you let me go through the categories, then maybe I might have answered your question that you potentially have. And then I also have the chat in slow mode. So that means that it just makes it easier for me to see. So the comments don't come up. I think it's like 20 seconds in between comments or something like that. Hi from Germany, Santa Cruz, California, all these awesome places. Lots of sunny places, it sounds like. So, Albuquerque, New Mexico, nice. And also, I have a ton of resources in the description box. So I just packed it full of resources I thought would be helpful, including previous videos, because I did get questions about like what I wish I knew before coming to Iceland, for instance. And I did a whole video on that, as well as how I met my husband. I also did a whole video on that, how I moved here and the process of moving here, such as you know, visa requirements and what types of people need to do more paperwork or it's harder for, such as people from the US, Canada, and different places, probably UK now because of Brexit. So, hi. And would I say that Iceland's the best country in the world? I would say so far it's the best country for me. It's hard to say for everybody. So, how working in Iceland is different than the United States, I made a video on that and why I moved here. So, just as FYI. And then I have other resources based on people's questions, but I will talk about that as I go through. So, hi, I'm South Carolina, and I'm just gonna get started then. Memphis, Arkansas, nice. And Atlanta, Connecticut, Iceland. Oh, hoping to get to Iceland in September. Yeah, I hope so too. Austin, New Jersey. Awesome. This is so great. I'm excited. So, okay, settling into life here as well as my status. So, that category is what we're starting off with first. And one of the questions I got was, how did you plan the move? So obviously I talked about, moving to Iceland, but the planning of the move was kind of an interesting thing for me because I'd never moved overseas before. And I was pretty nervous about it, to be honest, just because, you're trying to take all the things that you think you need. But I ended up coming with, I think, like 5 or 6 bags. And luckily, my husband's brother, so my brother in law, was able to take some bags for me, and that was great. Just because cost wise, it's pretty expensive because he'd come for a visit to New York City. So in essence, the planning of the move was really minimal. Toronto, hi. The planning of the move was very minimal, just because I was not bringing furniture. I was not bringing a car. I didn't own a car when I lived in New York City, and just like a lot of things that it wasn't necessary and that we would just figure out when I got here. So the move in terms of physically moving was not as hard as, emotionally, like for instance, leaving my mom or something, things like that. And the requirements for moving, like I mentioned, there's a video in the description box below that goes through what you basically need to look into. And then the Útlendingastofnun, which is the director of immigration in Iceland, on their website they have lists, and they also have applications and what you would essentially need if you're going to get a resident permit, which is, or a working visa, which is what most people would need if they're coming from the United States. So, what was it like when you first moved from New York? Ooh, Australia, pretty far away. So, what was it like when you moved first from New York? Did it take you long to settle away from city life? I was pretty much done with city life. I love New York City. It helped to make me the person that I am today. I love going back to visit, but it was becoming just intense in terms of like, I lived in Bushwick. I grew up in Bushwick, and not many people, I think, are meet people, at least I've heard this, that actually grew up in Bushwick, because it became such a popular place recently that people are like, oh, those people were pushed out, basically, which a lot of them have been. But yeah, oh, I'm glad the sound is really good. Oh, when I speak Icelandic. Okay, I thought you were talking about the sound right now on my microphone, but okay. Icelandic, thank you. But basically, I felt very much ready to be here. And so having a job before coming, I think too, it puts your mind in a headspace of like, yeah, this is going to be, and for me, it was like, this is an adventure, especially since I was going to be working for an outdoor adventure company. And I just am like, what? Like just all the opportunities that are potentially available to me. And so my mind was so set on just embracing this new life that I have, that I never really had time to think about, like, am I settling in? It just happened naturally. And I'm just really happy that that's the case for me. I know it's different for everybody, but I was not, bothered by the fact that I didn't have to get on a crowded train anymore and be like what I call like a metal box squished in with a bunch of other people, like, so I was very happy just to get that part over with and move on to a different lifestyle, something a little bit slower. Iceland is not slow per se, but it's definitely slower than New York City. And no, it didn't take me long to settle in. I think getting used to seeing the language more often was really hard. And that part, my brain was just like, well, in fact, I have a story that might, I think later on, one of the other questions that I related to, because it was like, oh, this is not fun right now. I don't, so do you have dual citizenship now that you are married to an Icelander? No. So it's not like an automatic thing that I just get to have citizenship. It is a certain amount of years you have to be here, and you have to show that you've been paying your taxes all of this time. You have to show that, I think with citizenship you need like a background check from the FBI, which you also need that, if I'm remembering correctly, that it was in essence, yeah, exactly. This person said I wasn't starting over. That is very true. So in essence, you have to get a background check, and I had to show also that I hadn't been married before, since Gunnar and I were doing it on a residence permit that's based off of my relationship being married to him. So after 4 years of living here, I'm able to be eligible for Icelandic citizenship. And just recently, and this is a very, like, I've not told anybody this publicly, only my like nuclear family knows that I recently was approved for permanent residence. So that means that I can permanently be in the country and I don't need to worry about like a work visa, which I didn't need a work visa before, but let's just say, you know, knock on wood, this doesn't happen. Goodnut and I, we're not together anymore. As a permanent resident, it's not dependent on this relationship any longer. And because I'm from the US originally, normally if I were to needed to work for a company, then I would have to um, get that company to sponsor me. And so that is not the case with the, ooh, hit the microphone. So that is not the case with a permanent residence. And then the next step after that is citizenship. And so I do want to get citizenship and I am planning to apply for that. And I hear some people, is there equivalent of a green card? Yeah, so permanent residence would be in essence like that. That's like me having a green card. And would you ever go back to the US? So that question is coming up, but I mean, I don't know. And my current life right now, I don't see myself back in the United States. So that's just how I feel about it. And I'm really enjoying what I'm doing and I'm really like loving being in this country and the adventures and I love going back to visit the US, but it isn't where I can like it's not where I picture my life going, but never say never. So, okay, how do you deal with the lack of diversity, especially coming from New York? Yeah, that was hard. Thank you for the congratulations. Yeah, it was a really fun moment to know that like I got that status because it's just nice to not have to worry about filing paperwork every year because I still had to do that. So okay, lack of diversity. That was hard for sure. And I've basically thought to myself, okay, this is not New York. So I set my expectations this way, and I'm sweating by the way, because my ring light is really warm. But I set my expectations knowing that this is not going to be like other, maybe even bigger cities or cities in Europe that have more people living in them, more diverse individuals in general. But as I've lived here, I've met more people, and I'm really surprised, very pleasantly surprised at the amount of diversity in this country. First of all, they have to put it out there that there's, I have done a video in Icelandic. So this person's asking me that's why I haven't. I have done a video in Icelandic books. So FYI, you should check that out. So 15% of the population in Iceland is people of foreign origin. Now, it's not necessarily people from the United States. In fact, a large a part of those individuals are from Poland or from like Eastern Europe. So like they make up a decent amount of the people living here. And I actually really would like to get a person on that is living here and is from Poland and like talk about their experience because there's for sure a lot of individuals here who have mixed experience. And the Polish experience, I think when it comes to prejudice in Iceland, that's an area that Polish people can speak to more so than like some other cultures, just because there's more of them and there's been more like um, judgment around actions of a few people, you know, that have reflected on the whole community sometimes. And that has been, of course, unfair. But once last summer, when the Black Lives Matter movement solidarity gathering happened, that's when I saw the amount of people of color living in Iceland. And I was shocked. And I was like, wait a minute, where have all these people been hiding? And it's just like we're all going about, you know, our lives or whatever. But I just had no idea that so many of these individuals lived here. And after that gathering, some people were like, hey, we're going out to eat. Do you want to come? And I went and I met these like fabulous women and that's how I ended up meeting Claudia Ashani Wilson, who is the human rights lawyer from Jamaica. So I got introduced to a group that did not know existed before. And actually, we're on like a private Facebook group. And we like sometimes get together for things and stuff like that. So there are for sure women of color, Black women, and I mean from the United States, from the Caribbean, from the UK, from, you know, women of color from literally all over. And it's amazing. And I'm just so grateful for that I was able to find this community, but it's not easy to find. And also in Breiðholt, which is one of the more diverse communities in Iceland. The thing that really bothers me about Breiðholt, meaning like the reputation that it has, is that people call it like the ghetto in Iceland. And that's because there was like some government housing or something like that, that this just ended up getting this name. I don't think it has to do with the diversity piece, but if an Icelander is in the comments and wants to comment on that, feel free to do so. But that's how it's been explained to me that when I'm like, wait a minute, what? This, no, like this, you guys don't know what the ghetto looks like, okay? um, so that's the thing that was, really bizarre to me to hear. But there is where you'd find a store like Afrozone where they sell food. It's a woman I think who owns it is from Ghana, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I know I think she's from somewhere like that. And I've gone in there, and it made me feel like I was in Brooklyn, and I was just having the best time buying like aloe vera and like different things because it was just stuff that's normally not available here. So I just love the fact that I, can find something like that. And then in the same area, they also had a Polish food market and like Thai food and whatever else. Someone's asking me where is my family from originally from. So before New York, I just know that my dad's parents and family were in South Carolina and my mom's family was in Rochester in upstate New York. I know I need to do a lot more research, but that's the extent of what I have in terms of where they're from. And I'm just going to go to the next question. So, how I deal with lack of diversity is basically meeting up with these individuals and then, of course, going to New York to be able to experience more diversity. Like I don't expect that to be what I'm going to see in Iceland all the time, but it is possible that you can be in groups of people that look like me in Iceland. And yeah, there's a decent amount of us at least that are in this circle. So, did I feel welcomed? And what are some challenging or unexpected parts? The thing for me, and I think that's a great question. All of them are great questions, honestly, but this one is a helpful question because that was what I was initially thinking about before I moved was would I be welcomed here? And I'm a planner. I'm one of those individuals. I just don't like get up on a whim and move somewhere. I very much want to feel like I have a decent understanding of what I'm getting myself into. Of course, you can never be fully ready, but a little bit of research helps. And I came to visit here at least five, if not six times before moving. And so, oh, thank you so much for the super chats. So I'm going to answer your question in a second. So I basically met my husband's family, especially his mom. His mom, Mama Helga is what I call her. Uh, when she gives me hugs, I try to hug back as well as possible. When she gives me hugs though, it is literally the best hug of your life. And she hugs everybody like this, like they are her child. And you just feel so welcomed, so happy, so at home in essence. And I just am so grateful because the whole family was so welcoming to me. I mean, they didn't give me hugs like her because she's just a very special and a special person. I love my mother-in-law. We get along so well. And I was just so grateful that the family was just so open to me and I got a chance to be able to, learn that way. And then at work the same way. So for me, I did feel very welcomed. I can't speak for everybody else's experience. I can only hope that happens for other people, but that's how it's gone for me. So I'm just going to answer this question real quick. I'm thinking of visiting Iceland. What can you recommend for seeing puffins? A specific time of the year? Yeah. So I will just answer this one now, just because it's the easiest. Meaning like Bjark is one place, and then there's also Dyrhóli, and in the East Fjords, I got the name of the place, but in the summertime, so I would say May to end of July, FY. Okay, so let's go on to yeah. I definitely feel embraced. I mean, I'll put it like this. I was not sure even how people would react to me having this channel sharing my views about Iceland. And one of the things that's been so helpful for me, like the podcast and YouTube, has been Icelanders who I've never met to this day who have sent me messages and said, "Hey, I think it's really interesting that you're sharing your perspective on Iceland. And I think it's really fascinating that, you're learning about this or this is kind of your way of getting to know Iceland you're sharing with other people." So for me, that has been such a beautiful thing, and I'm really grateful for all those individuals, because for them maybe it might have just been a comment, but for me it was just like, thank you for seeing that, I'm not trying to be something that am not. Like, I don't want to be Icelandic. I don't ever think of myself as, I think of myself as a, yes, the Western Islands, yes, for puffins is great too. I see myself as a New Yorker. I see myself as Jules from New York, who lives in Iceland and gets this awesome opportunity to be able to share. And I think that's what it really is about for me, is like an exchange. And so the fact that Icelanders who have been commenting see that and appreciate it and encourage it has been great. And it's in boosted my enthusiasm basically to continue. And do I feel at home in Iceland? I mean, I call Iceland my second home because, and I'm sorry if you can see that I'm sweating. I'm just so warm. I should open the window, but it's raining. And I see Iceland as my second home, meaning New York will always be my first home. And that's mainly because that's what helped to shape me. And I'm grateful for New York. I'm also grateful for Iceland because in this chapter of my life, it's helping to shape me in a different way. So, yes, I do feel at home here. Okay. And people are asking about like being acclimated. Like I mentioned, I use that word meaning like comfortable for me, but I don't know if they're asking like if I feel like I'm Icelandic or if I feel like I'm part of Iceland in that way. I feel like I'm a foreign national that lives in Iceland, and I appreciate and enjoy that experience and being able to share it. So wish I would interview that guy who does the A to Z. So yeah, A to yeah, maybe I'll get a chance to interview him. He's a comedian, and yeah. So okay, I'm just going back to these other questions. How would I compare my life in Iceland to life in the United States? What's the biggest difference between these two countries in your opinion? Whew, that is a full video on its own, and I have talked about the differences of the United States and Iceland. So I won't go into it. Not that I can't, but I won't go into it completely. Um, just because, like I mentioned, there's videos that you can see where I'm doing comparisons like work-life balance and whatever else. But I'd say a lot of it comes down to Iceland is not as big as and I'm gonna get to universal healthcare, don't worry. So Iceland is not as big as the United States, like not even a little bit, right? And when you think about the culture here, like it's more of a community. Whereas at the United States, there's different communities within those states, within those boroughs or, counties or whatever else. And it's just so different as you go across the whole nation. Like, of course, we'll have Fourth of July, for instance, or like big holidays. But when I think of Christmas, this is like a good example to me here in Iceland and how it's celebrated and how like mostly everyone else, mostly everybody in the country who is in Iceland at the time of Christmas, they celebrate it a similar way, meaning they get dressed up and it's on the what is Christmas Eve for us is when they're doing Christmas, celebrations. But in essence, what they are doing is getting dressed up in their finest clothes and they're having dinner and sitting down at 6 o'clock to eat dinner. And like, that is a phenomenon for me that the majority of a nation does this. Or like on New Year's Eve, the majority of them are watching the Áramótaskaupið. Oh, I totally botched that. But anyway, the yearly comedy show that kind of wraps up stuff. And that, in my opinion, is something that in the United States, you're not going to see this type of unison or like, I wouldn't say sameness, but like adhering to those same things because there's so much more diversity, so much more difference. And then also, too, here, there's a lot more of like people kind of feeling like we're a community that looks after each other. And the United States, it can get into, especially in bigger places, that everyone's kind of out, looking out for themselves, which you have to adapt because of where you are. So it's really hard to compare them in that way, meaning what's the biggest difference? There's so many big differences, like Iceland's not even big enough to have its own Amazon. So like that's a huge difference. For instance, I totally miss being able to order things quickly, and it doesn't have to be from Amazon. I know that they probably are, in terms of practices, have had their issues for sure. But just as the FYI, that's kind of like if I give you an example of how I look at it, is that yes, I've done videos where I've said, okay, this happens in the US versus this happens in United States, but I usually have to take it by topic because if I took it just all at once, it would be very difficult to try and yeah, go head to head, basically. Um, I'm gonna get into the job situation. Don't worry, I have. In fact, that's coming up after this section because I know a lot of people are wondering. So no worries about that. And okay, do I expect to live in Iceland the rest of my life? So someone else had asked me this kind of before, and at the moment, this is my foreseeable future. So yes, I guess that would be the best answer. Do you plan to settle there, retire there? Yeah. So I said this to Ganath the other day. I was like, wouldn't it be great if we had like a summer house somewhere warm in the future? And he was like, you mean like the Westman Islands? Like he was like joking, whatever. And so in my opinion, I would love to have a place where I could go sometimes in the winter to just go and get more sunshine and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't, it's not that I have to change like completely where I'm living from this country. Okay. And what do I miss? Well, I definitely miss like we've talked about diversity, and like I mentioned, I go back to New York to get that. But there's certain types of foods that I miss, and I'm there's a food section too. But just in terms of like diversity in foods, there's certain foods I really like being able to eat, or like areas in New York that I really like going to, because a friend of mine describes New York not as a pot, but as like a spice rack, where you could pick the different spices that you want, so you can go like to Chinatown, you can go to the Italian section, or you can go to the Caribbean section. Like there's so many different, places where in New York where you can go to these neighborhoods and get different experiences in cuisine, Spanish food, like all these different things. So I miss that. Do I miss Brooklyn? Not specifically Brooklyn, no. Um, Peanut butter M&Ms. Okay. Is it difficult? Oh, this is a really interesting question. So, is it difficult to navigate the system, healthcare, taxes, papers, renting? So for people who are interested just in understanding that part, that for me has been difficult, meaning I and I'm one of those people that like now, even in the US I did this too. An accountant took care of my taxes, but I still understood it. And here it's like I don't really. I'm just accountant takes care of it. I make sure I get them all the information that they need. But honestly, like that part is, it feels a little overwhelming. And in the healthcare system, when I first got here, the understanding was like, you are not in a system until you're 6 months living here. And that's even for people who have, are Icelandic, meaning they were born and raised here, but they went to go live somewhere else for a long period of time. So that part too can be a little bit like, okay. And then I didn't know that and I had to have supplemental health care just for those 6 months, and then you're just automatically rolled into the system. And I didn't know though that also there's like a limit to how much you need to spend every month before the government goes like, oh, okay, you shouldn't have to spend so much more. So a lot of people would say like if you're gonna go make appointments for like specialists, which you do have to pay for. So that's the other thing. The healthcare is not universal in that it's free, but it is universal in that like everybody has healthcare. And it's just like heavily subsidized in essence. It's not as expensive as for sure, nowhere near as it would be in the United States. And that's the part that, has been for me very comforting because it's like if I get sick, then I know that I can go to the doctor and not fear what the price of that would be. So, but yeah, that's language, the wall of language. It's not like these things have to be, I mean, taxes can be a little bit more complicated, but the wall of language can be very intimidating here in Iceland. And so that's been the part for me that I don't know technical terms in tax law, and I don't know technical terms in healthcare. So, before you learn that, and even once, sometimes when you see it, you have to see it over and over again in order to be like, okay, now I think I understand what I'm looking at, and that I can, navigate this a little bit, but it still feels very intimidating. And do you see yourself ever, moving back to New York? No. And how do I cope with a small number of inhabitants? that everyone knows each other. So not everybody knows each other like that. Like literally, we go to Akureyri or, anywhere in the north or the West Fjords, and if I say my husband's name, people are like, "Yes, I know him." In fact, some people they might have to be like, "Maybe," and then some people are like, "Yeah, I don't know him whatsoever." Do you still vote as a United States citizen? Yes, absolutely. And I like that to a degree because this whole like everybody literally knows everybody would be really hard if it just felt like you were going to one big family reunion everywhere you went. And so I am not um I'm not saying that, when Icelanders get together, they do this thing where they normally say like, "Oh, who's this parent? Who's your parent?" And like they'll talk about maybe to see how their connections are, which I think is pretty cool. They can be able to do that, but it isn't like I mentioned, literally like, "Hey, that's Gunnar," and we're just in some random town. It could happen. Let me just be fair, it can happen, but that is not how it always is. So it isn't hard to cope with that because we get to meet, new people the same way. And if we're both speaking Icelandic, then they just speak Icelandic to us, and that's, you know, just fine. And ooh, this was such an interesting question to me. Would you have moved abroad if your partner wasn't in the picture? So, yes. And when? Don't know. So, okay. When I was in college, I was in engineering school, and that's what I have a degree in is engineering. I wanted to go study abroad in the Middle East. And why? I don't know. There was something about like it was really attractive to me about going to like Egypt or and learning Arabic. And I took Arabic. I took a semester or 2 semesters maybe of Arabic in college because not at RPI because RPI didn't provide it. I was going to RPI full time, and then at night I would go to an Arabic class at a community college nearby, which is pretty funny that I was making this commitment. But I don't know why. I was just really drawn to this area and to that language. I feel like it's really beautiful. And at the time, I was going to apply to go to do like a study abroad program because I felt like, for a long time in my life, I felt like the United States is interesting, but I really want to live in another country. And I ended up not doing it. So my father, unfortunately, when I was in college, he passed away. And it's just one of those things where like, yeah, I'm not really making these big life decisions right now, like moving away from my family and whatever else, because it was a hard time for all of us. And I think it was the right thing to do in my case. And because I was already living a few hours away from my family. So in life though, even though I moved back to New York City and worked there, in my head it was like, yeah, I would love to, but I always thought it would be work related somehow. And I was working for a company that the main office was in the UK before I moved to Iceland. And even though I, necessarily didn't want to stay with that company, I did always think to myself, like, I wonder how it would be if I wanted to transfer to the UK or something like that. So it has been something that has continuously been on my mind. And it's just a coincidence to some degree, or maybe not a coincidence, that I was meant to come, or that I ended up in Iceland. Maybe I was meant to come here. I don't know. That just like slipped out. So someone asked, how do I get in touch with locals? And I mean, maybe they mean from their perspective of being outside of Iceland. A lot of Icelanders are on Facebook. Facebook is like, one of the, in terms of a lot of Icelanders, not teenagers, so adult Icelanders, that would be a place where a lot of them end up going and are active when they want to share things about, news or whatever's happening. So there's tons of Facebook groups. And there was a person who had said that they were pretty lonely as an expat. And I'm sorry that you're going through that. I know that this is also a hard time in general for many people. So, um, I mean, just for me personally, I've not had the issue of being lonely, but I do know what it's like to be separated from your family and maybe, wanting that closeness. So I just hope that you're able to find some individuals around you to be able to find, community, and don't stop trying to reach out to meet people. So working in Iceland, we're going to go into that. And someone asked if I have double citizenship. I did mention that earlier that I do not, and but I would like to. My career in Iceland. So if I take you from when I got here, so I've been working in digital marketing for the past 6 years, or more than 6 years, in the United States and in Iceland. So yeah, more than 6 years. So I've been living here almost 5. So I ended up getting a job before moving to Iceland. as a content marketing manager for an outdoor adventure company. And then I was essentially headhunted, even though it wasn't by a recruiter necessarily, but by a person who was one of the owners of this company, this agency. So he and I had always wanted to work together. Someone that I'd worked with when I was in the United States told him about me. We kept in contact, and we're always kind of like trying to figure out how we could, be able to work together on digital marketing stuff. And a role came up to be the chief digital strategy officer at a company, at an advertising agency here. And I was like, that's a great opportunity. I was not expecting to move into that role, but that's kind of what just happened. And that was a role that I was in up until recently. And I now do contract work. So I decided to leave that company for my own reasons, meaning mainly because I worked a lot there. I mean, I'll just give you like the little snippet. My work life balance was not good there, not for me. I have a personality of like wanting to go all in and do a lot of things. And at advertising agencies, which I'd never worked at before, I learned the hard way that for me, personality wise, it really is not the healthiest environment because I'll just end up doing a whole lot. And yeah. And I was afraid of burning out, and I just really didn't want that. And I'm also so passionate about all things Iceland, so I wanted to free up my time to be able to create content and still, have income. So I do contract work for digital marketing and things like that. But I'm also like focusing a whole lot on all things Iceland. So yeah. And someone in the comments, so Inky Björk is explaining why it's called a ghetto. So just as an FYI, if you want more information in the chats, it would be great to go and look there, what Ingi Björk is saying, because it's giving some history to this Breiðholt being called the ghetto aspect of it. So thank you for that. And how difficult is to find employment as American? So this is hard for Americans in that people from the EU and Schengen area countries. I need I need a television show. That would be awesome. So people from the EU and Schengen area countries, they can come to Iceland and work freely. Like they don't have to go through the hoops and the paperwork and having a company sponsor them and everything else. Like it is really nice for them because Iceland has an agreement with them. And I think that's great. It's just the United States is a very different place in terms of allowing people to freely come in. And of course, the U.S. has its own agreements with other places, but it doesn't have a special agreement with Iceland to be like people can just come. So because it's almost like a tit for tat, I think this is a very political thing in essence, right? It's like because United States makes it difficult for other countries make it difficult for them. That's what it feels like to me. I can't say that's literally the reason, but based off of what's happened with COVID, for instance, and the traveling that way, it wouldn't surprise me. And so, uh, in that way, though, like I mentioned previously, if you didn't catch that, that's totally fine, but I'll just give a little synopsis of it. In essence, you have to either get a company to sponsor you. You could be an athlete. I mean, there are people who come from the United States who play basketball or soccer here and stuff like that. So that is possible. But a lot of people do the cohabitation type of, and cohabitation is different than married. So you don't have all the same rights, but you do have the ability to live here. And someone says true, it's reciprocity. Yeah, I totally think so. so and so it makes it a little bit harder. It's not that employment's not available, it's just that if a company has to, find somebody and they have to do more work for that person, meaning going to Ulendingastofnen, putting in paperwork to say that they sponsor you, and it's a risk for them hiring anybody, right? So it ends up being that it's more challenging. It happens. I know people here who are from the United States and they're purely here on work visas. So don't feel discouraged in that way. Just know that there is this extra hoop. And also like the company CCP that does like gaming, there are definitely people there who are programmers. So if you have a special skill, that comes into play really, really well for you. But if your special skill is like a doctor or a nurse or something, the problem is speaking the language, Icelandic, right? That will always come into play when you have to deal with the community here, especially the older generation, because now you're in a space where, that is an important part of the service, and being able to communicate in that way. Someone asked if we have pets. We don't have pets. Gunnar is allergic to cats, and I have to show you this. It's so funny. So he's allergic to cats. I love cats, and so he got me this cat. This is just and this is always like in the back of my videos, in when I'm in the room, and people might think that's kind of weird, but it's just like a funny joke in my that I have. So is it moving with a retirement pension possible? I think so, but I don't want to lead you astray and be like, yes, absolutely. But I believe that people do like have retired and have, been able to come here and stuff like that. So hi to all the people who are coming in that are new. So just FYI, there's a lot that I've been talking about so far. So just, you might have to rewind a little bit later, but I'm just going through the different categories. So I did talk about the average amount of vacations in that video of what it's like to work in Iceland versus the United States, how I got a job. I also talk about that too, and in that same video. But I just in my experience, it took me around 7 months to find something. For some people, it could take way longer. For other people, it could take way shorter. It's really hard to calculate, like, it will happen this way. And we were just looking through advertisements, you know? So just as FYI, yes, Gunnar is a keeper. He's a cutie. He tries. He's like, I, of course, would never want to put his life in danger. Yes, I'm going to give you the sense of cost of rent. So I have that coming up a little bit in home stuff. So no worries about that. And how do you? So in terms of like I'm talking about the United States, and some people said non-citizen of Iceland. So again, you have to take into account whether you're from the EU or Schengen area countries, which is 26 countries, or if you're outside of that. If you're outside of those, then you're going to have a more difficult time, but not impossible. And I definitely think it's much easier though in that group if you have a specialty, like I mentioned. It's difficult to work sponsored outside of tourism. I mean, I worked outside of tourism, meaning in that advertising agency, even though I wasn't expecting it. And I know other people who are doing the same, but many people, that's the door that they come in through is tourism. And that's the door I came in through was that they needed somebody in digital marketing who already knew what they were doing to speak to a primarily English speaking audience. And there I was. I also talked about average vacation days. Someone asked me that as well. And job market. Right now, I mean, the job market is not good in terms of there are so many people who have been laid off. So I think, and thank you for people giving thumbs up. I think in the future, once things get to some level of, and I don't want to say normalcy, but just stability, maybe, because right now things feel a lot more unstable regarding so many people who have lost their jobs and who are at a point like who are waiting and hoping that they get a chance to get back to what they were doing or at least find a replacement. So that the job market is not very good right now. Just putting that out there. It doesn't mean that people can't find jobs. It's just it's harder. So and how to get a job when you don't speak Icelandic? Have a specialty. Have a special thing that you do that they need you for. That is always going to win out because and there are fields like that. I mean, digital marketing is something that is growing in Iceland. So if you are in that field or want to be, for sure, programming, another place. So I don't know all of them, but just as FYI. And people like, do you need to know Icelandic? Well, actually, I'm going to get into that. And job mobility. So I've only moved jobs once before deciding to kind of venture out on my own. And I mean, it wasn't a difficult thing, but I think if you're like in tourism, if you're working in retail or restaurant or something like that, then it might be, easier for you to move around. But if say you're like in finance and whatever else, it really might just depend on the company if they're willing to hire somebody who doesn't speak the language potentially. Um, and is there anything like a sizable gay community? Yeah, and there is definitely. And actually, I did a interview with Gogo Star, who is a drag queen in Iceland, and we talked a bit about that. I'll try to remember to put that into the description box. And yes, so someone actually mentioned that about drag community. And can you elaborate on the range of house prices? Yes, I will definitely do that. And would love to know if most Icelandic people are open-minded religiously. They definitely are. And Vona Oh yeah, tak. I'm just reading some of the comments here because I want to be able to balance between the two of them because I know there's different ones for sure, and I appreciate people who are sending in questions. And thank you very much. So it's very good and good content. What made you start doing videos on YouTube? I'm gonna answer that a little bit later because I was asked this and it's pretty funny. Not like hilarious funny, but like, interesting story. So learning Icelandic. When you knew you and your husband would be moving to Iceland, did you begin learning language then, or did you learn once you moved here? Learning about, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so before moving to Iceland, and like colors, like I was not doing, and like, just the golden daginn, or like things like that that I just wanted to get down so that I felt like I wasn't completely out of the loop. But I wasn't learning, I was doing it on my own. I wasn't in a classroom and I didn't have a teacher or anything. I was just like, a couple of things. And of course, I made it a choice to like reach out, the decision, I should say, to reach out to the company I was working for to make sure, like, is this okay? Like, what do I need to know? And they're like, no, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So that was another thing too. It was really nice. Like I wasn't feeling pressured by anybody. And let's see, I'm learning Icelandic, but how essential is it to when you move there? So when you first move, of course, if you knew Icelandic really well, it would be great for you, right? Like, meaning like easier to understand conversations, television shows, whatever. But it's not essential to come to Iceland and be fluent in Iceland. It's not even essential. There are many people come here who don't know anything, and they're working, living, and being a part of society in the way that they can. Maybe they're not socializing as much with as many Icelanders because at parties, Icelanders go like they just roll right back into Icelandic very easily. Like it's their native language. It would be like, anywhere else where it's the main language is spoken, people do this. So I think that it's beneficial, absolutely, but you need to allow yourself to take time into doing it and be okay with the fact that it's going to be challenging. And I'm saying this coming from this is what I have to say to myself often. Just like be okay with the fact that it's challenging. Don't let it dictate how you feel about yourself, meaning like your self-esteem, because it has for me in the past. I've gotten to the point where I've cried over not feeling like I was far enough along in knowing the language, or that I, was fearing going into situations where Icelandic would be mainly spoken. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to be that person who doesn't understand. So it's not essential, but and two, it's a journey is how I see it. And so, just allow yourself to embrace it and then be challenged and then continue on, be consistent with it. And do you speak when you go to a cafe, supermarket, etc., to the staff? I do. So I live in Mosfellsbær, which is a 15 or 20-minute drive outside of downtown Reykjavik. And most people here, everybody here for the most part, like in all the stores, the bakeries, wherever you go, post office, they speak Icelandic. They speak Icelandic to me when I get there. And if I were to respond in English, they would help me. It's not like they'd be like, I refuse, But they expect that I'm going to speak Icelandic because I'm outside the downtown area. And that's the part that I feel is really helpful is here, it's automatic Icelandic. Downtown Reykjavik, especially when a lot more tourists were coming, and I have to drink some water. Sorry. So downtown Reykjavik, where there's a lot more people who are tourists, it's assumed that many people who, and I hate to say this because in my mind, like, this typical Icelander look is basically a white Icelander. And so the assumption is if you look like, XYZ, then maybe that person assumes you're Icelandic and maybe they'll speak to you Icelandic. But then I've also heard that there are many Icelanders who do not get spoken Icelandic to downtown, right? So this can, that, it really just depends. And for me, I don't take offense to it anymore. I used to be like, oh, this is really messed up. Like I, went into the conversation saying golden daginn or whatever else, and they responded to me. And realizing that these people, the people who are working in this service job, they are having to make a mental decision every time that a person comes by. And it's a lot. So sometimes they just default to English because so many people that day have been speaking in English. So, someone asked me if I'd ever been, looked at as a tourist, been mistaken for a tourist. And yeah, that has happened. And has it ever affected my feelings? It has. Now it doesn't so much. And I've also noticed, and this is an interesting trick when you have a partner who looks more like what, Icelanders are thought to look like. So Gunnar, for instance, like a lot of people were like, he looks like a Viking, whatever. So if he's speaking Icelandic to me, when the person, whoever the service person is coming up, they will just automatically assume that I speak Icelandic. Period. End of story. And they would speak Icelandic to me. I've tested it out a couple of times, even with this same person, meaning in a situation where they came back later and he was talking Icelandic to me, and the person spoke Icelandic to me, and then he talked English to me, and the person switched over to English, and it was like, interesting, because they didn't have to, right? Like, but it was just like their brain goes, okay, this is probably easier for them. I'll just do that. So it can vary, and my feelings are less hurt by it, believe me, now. But I do try my best, especially when I'm alone, to speak Icelandic to whoever I'm talking to, period, regardless of what they look like. If they're in the country and they're doing, some type of service, I speak Icelandic to them. And I've actually encountered people who don't speak Icelandic, and that's okay. And they say that, and I'm nice to switch over to English, and that's fine. Are Icelandic people patient with people learning the language? That depends too. Many of them, if they tell you, if they sense that you're having a hard time, I think they're trying to be polite by like switching over to English. Excuse me. However, that can be frustrating, of course, if you are trying or if you have an accent and that accent makes it harder for them to understand you. So, yeah, I think it really just is one of those things where you have to be persistent about it, or even, someone was like, just tell them you don't speak English. And I was like, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to lie. I'll just tell them that I'm learning. Please, could you speak to me in Icelandic? And that's how I like to approach it. Everybody is different. Someone had asked a great question about how has Gunnar been, I guess, supportive of me as an expat. And in his own ways, similarly, because Icelandic people, like I mentioned, they're trying to be helpful. In his own ways, sometimes, when I've wanted maybe to speak Icelandic more, and he wanted to say something to me, he'll be like, "Hey, can I just say this in English?" And he'll say it. And that has been helpful in that, I get the understanding of what he wants to say, but I still need to learn in Icelandic. And this month, so all of March, by the way, Gunnar and I are speaking only in Icelandic. And people might think that we do that all the time. But when we met, we were in the United States and we were speaking English, and it was just such a natural thing for us that we still have to combat this, and we still have to talk to each other and be purposeful about when we speak Icelandic to each other. So I was like, we've done it once before. And it's an initiative that I start because he does give me that space to be like, you do it when you feel comfortable and I will support you. Right. And I'm very grateful for that. So last July, we did it for the whole month, and that was harder, way harder. And then now we're doing it all of this month, and it's not, I wouldn't say easy, but it's easier than the last time that we did it. And I'm really excited about the fact that it does come out so much more easier for me, because as much as it's a little easier for me to write down and think about what I'm wanting to say. Like some people can relate to this, and but when I'm thinking in the language, there's so much to decline that my brain is like, jumping all over the place, trying to figure it out. And it's just like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this to ourselves? you know? But in reality, this is a very necessary part of learning. And being uncomfortable in that way has been necessary for me. So I'm just pushing myself in that direction. He's been very supportive in me doing that and being a part of that process. So I'm just going to answer some other questions here. So does Iceland have a folk music tradition at all? Yes, they do. Yes, there's definitely folk music here. And please talk about Iceland's progressive, ecological, and feminist politics. So I think it'd be good, Joseph, for me to bring on a person and interview them, because my knowledge of it is limited in terms of the history. Like I have some things that I talk about like on the podcast and things like that, but I would really love a person who could just break it on down for you. So I will just have that on my list of, actually I already have it on my list of things. There are a couple of people on my list who, I'm just trying to make sure I can get interview slots with them to bring them on, because all of this is really important and a part of what's helping to shape the society here. How often do I see my family? Usually it was about once or twice a year. This year has obviously been quite different. And my mom likes to come here. Not necessarily in the winter. She likes to come in the winter for New Year's because of all the fireworks and the parties. Like she's a partier. People don't realize that. Like on camera and everything else, I'm social. And I'm social with people when I go out, but my mom is the social butterfly. And it's funny that when I was younger, they would call me her shadow because I followed her everywhere. And that is just the truth. And I still like even when I'm around her, I kind of like, sometimes tone it down and she's just like social butterfly. It's amazing. So she likes to come here and have fun. And my sister as well. So, how easy is it to study abroad in Iceland? I think as long as you're able to get the. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying the interviews with the prominent women. I think if you're able to get, is it Start Master, the approval, meaning like you're applying to school here and then showing financially that you can support yourself, meaning living in an apartment and feeding yourself. There's like a financial requirement that you have to show that you have in the bank, and I don't know the amount, but I think it's like for at least 6 months or whatever the amount of time that you're supposed to be eligible to be in school here. That's a big part of it because obviously they don't want students to come here and be starving and homeless because that would be terrible. So that's just FY. So I don't know how hard it is, meaning like the entry, but there are a decent amount of people who study here from the United States. So, and that's one way that some people end up going into eventually living and working here. Albeit, I think it is still a little harder. It's not like an automatic, like if you went to school here, that you would automatically get a job, but it does happen to some people. So, on to friends and family, because I've already talking about a little bit, but what services, lifestyle options are available to elderly in Iceland? Is it the tradition to live with your family till you pass away, or does a person at some point live in a care home? So, hi to all the people who are coming in. So, in terms of I'll take the example of my mother in law and some of the people that I know. So, there are homes here, meaning like there are buildings, apartment buildings, that they're not assisted living, but they're for people over the age of 65 and who can take care of themselves. And so there they have a community where, there's activities that go on that are put together by, whoever's in charge of doing that. And there's also, um, I think just in general, like different types of ability to like get access to things because you're in this 65 or over community. And also it's, people that and it's not like I don't know, a mix of families, whatever else. And then, of course, there are assisted home facilities. So there's a mix of these things. It's like whether or not you can do it on your own and whether or not you really need to have someone care for you. There are some people who they live with their families. I don't know if it's necessarily till they pass away. I mean, if it's getting to the point where you really need a lot of help, it's probably better to go into an assisted living facility. And that seems to be an option that's readily available to Icelanders here. So I'd say for the most part that seems to be the case, but I do know of people who have their grandparents living in their homes with them, who did have that when they were younger, and Gunnar had that situation when he was a kid for sure. Um, do you find that it's more difficult to make friends, build community being American? So this is an interesting question because I don't know if it has, for me, anything to do with being from the United States. I mean, someone else could feel differently for sure, but I make friends in a way that, like, I make very few friends. I'm not the person who wants to have like 30 different people that I'm needing to connect with all the time. Like, this is just my personality is I want to give the attention to that person that's my friend, and I want to be able to be a responsible, good friend to them. So if we're able to get together, because my schedule gets really busy, everybody's schedule gets busy, then making friends was for me based off of that connection. I've not had a hard time making friends. I don't have a ton of them. Like I mentioned, I have a lot of people that I know that I like to hang out with, but like deep friendships. So my family in Iceland, what I'm so grateful for is that my sister-in-laws who live here, I have really great friendships with them. Like they feel like my sisters, and I can feel like I can go to them and talk to them about things that are bothering me or whatever, and they, vice versa. And my sister too, who doesn't live in Iceland. Like we have a very good relationship, very different than of course my sister-in-laws, but still, like, that's it's great to have. And then I have friends who are outside of my Icelandic family who are Icelandic. So some of them are Icelandic. There's like one or two, there's two Icelandic, and then a few that are from the United States or just from, other countries. And that's been really nice because you get a mix of the different people and individuals, and it's nice to be able to get different perspectives because, like, for instance, for people who from the US, we can chit chat about things that we can relate to, and then I can learn things about Iceland from other individuals that are from here. So they think an interview with the world's first female who is democratically elected as president, Victis. I would love to. I met her once, and actually, it's funny. uh, You might think this is kind of bizarre that I have this book here, but I have this book sitting here. And the reason why I do is because I bought this a long time ago. It says here actually on sale. I bought it a long time ago because I've been planning to read it for such a long time. And I met her at a polyglot conference that was held in Reykjavik. Um, oh man, like 3 years ago, or maybe more. And I have always wanted to interview her. I know she's older, and so for me, I just timing wise, it's like but I'm trying to get to a point where I can interview her in the near future. And so Iceland have a welfare system, people who live in poverty. There are people who live in poverty in Iceland, and I think that's very surprising to some people. And who get assisted help from the government and things like that, because things can be hard on people for different reasons. I mean, there's different circumstances in people's lives. There could be addiction involved, there can be illness, whatever else. Like, there's so much that can happen, and for sure there are individuals, and just because you're getting help from the government does not mean you're living well. I don't even know where that concept comes from. I think it's just propaganda really that has been spread, especially in the United States. But like, for instance, I can't remember her name at the moment. Bára Halldórsdóttir. Like, she talks about in the interview that I did with her on the podcast, and that's specifically just audio podcast. I wish I'd gotten her a video, but we just weren't able to. We talk about the fact that, like, for her it's not been that easy, and she is disabled, and she's not able to go out and work regularly like other individuals. She does work and in different things in activism work, but she lives on the poverty line in essence, so it's hard for her. And that is one of the things that, like, she also tries to help people even though she's in a situation where she sometimes herself needs it. So I'm going to keep going with this with the family and friends. Is there expat community? Yes. There are definitely expats here in terms of micro communities, is what I call them. So on Facebook, again, a lot comes back to Facebook because Facebook is the place in Iceland where the social media platform where the majority of Icelanders seem to be, at least for now. And there are, like, away from home groups, living in Iceland. There are Americans living in Iceland. There are people from the UK living in Iceland. Like, they have all the different groups, and some of them have gatherings. And then you have one that, like, specifically for women or whatever else. So yes, there's definitely expat communities here, and some of them are thriving more than others in terms of getting together. But many of them are more about, like, sharing information, ideas, safe spaces to share their opinions about something maybe they feel like people from their country could understand, or their area of the world could understand potentially. So that's kind of interesting to me. And do you have lots of friends and family visit before COVID? I wouldn't say lots, but then again, if you think about, like, our wedding, which we had like 100 people or something at our wedding, that was a decent amount of people, and that was in 2017. So we've definitely had people come, and like I mentioned, my mom and my sister come often. They at least come once a year, and then I see them twice a year if when I'm going to them. And then we just have, like, random friends who come and stay with us. So it's really fun, and I enjoy doing, like, going to see them, and vice versa. Do I enjoy shopping at Costco? Sorry, that makes me laugh. Yeah, I do actually. It's really nice to be able to go buy, like, a huge bag of walnuts and almonds and stuff for a decent price. There's certain things I don't buy there because I don't need it, but there are definitely things that I buy that I'm like, oh man, thankfully they sell this here because it is so expensive other places in the country. And yeah, I can't imagine being homeless in Iceland either, right? It's not. Not a fun idea. Is it possible to do a gap year in Iceland? Well, again, it depends on where you're from because the visa for visiting is 3 months if you're like out from outside of these Schengen area EU places. So, yeah, I don't see how it would be possible unless you were doing like a some type of work or work exchange, which I do have something about that. And in the description box, I put a link to a couple of places where you if you wanted to do work exchange, you could find that just because someone asked about it and I thought it was a really interesting question. So I guess technically, yeah, you could if you be able to get that kind of work visa situation. My favorite my favorite word in Icelandic is it kind of varies sometimes, but frábært is one that I love saying because I had such a hard time saying it for so long. And once I got, like, I felt like I got it, I was like, yes, I'm always going to use this. So I often say that, which is like awesome, and actually, gekja, like, saying that is like amazing. Like, I like saying that, but when I was working at the advertising agency, when someone came up with a great idea, they'd be like, yeah, yeah. And I love that so much because it has so much like power behind it and enthusiasm. So I like that too. I guess I like words that express positive, fun things. And let's see. How did you make friends as an adult? There's so many friends questions. It's pretty funny to me. Not like this is bad. I just think it's really interesting and Tataratas. That's not, is that your favorite? Because that's not necessarily my favorite, but I have a deeper appreciation for it since living here. For people who might not know, Tataratas is like, in essence, it will all work out. I mean, it's kind of a very loose translation of it. And foods, I'm going to get to that actually really soon about which ones I miss. And do you know an easy way to travel to North Greenland? Do you have plans to travel to go there? I have been to Greenland, and this is really off topic, but I feel very, very lucky that I had the opportunity to go to Greenland in 2019, I believe was the year. And we went for 9 days. It was for work. We went to Kulasuk. So, very, not North Greenland, but it is a fascinating place. Like I want to go to Nuuk. A friend of mine who I worked with lives there, and I am, excuse me, thank you. A friend of mine lives there who I used to work with, and I'm just so curious to see what Nuuk looks like. Kulusuk, and I know I'm probably not saying this correctly, the pronunciation, so I apologize. But Kulusuk is so just I felt like you were like thrown back in time and the landscape and everything else, like it's amazing. And it's also a bit shocking because lifestyle wise, you're not used to some of the things that you'll see there. But I won't go too much into Greenland. I have not been to the Faroe Islands for someone who asked. I do want to go and I'm hoping to do that in the near future. Um, okay, so my favorite Icelandic food. So okay, that's kind of interesting. I do like a vegan version of rugbrød, and I also like flatkaka. So rugbrød is the one where it used to be baked in the ground because of geothermal energy, and just being it was so hot that you could like bake food or bake bread in the ground. It's like kind of sweet, and I think it's a bakery in Borgarnes where my mother-in-law's gotten vegan rugbrød, and I'm just like, yes, it's so good. And flatkaka is literally just flat bread, like unleavened bread, and it's just really tasty in my opinion. There are other ones. I have to think of it like off the top of my head. So, and making friends, I don't find it hard, but everyone is different, I know, and it's also easier being in a family. I'm just gonna make that really honest. That's my opinion. Is if you're in a family here or associated with a family, you get mm, introduced to a lot of different people. And that's how you can sometimes get to meet other people who maybe aren't in the family, but still are individuals who are pretty cool and you can build a relationship with. It's like a nice, way of kind of learning about different types of people in the country. So it doesn't have to be that way. There are people who come here who are not at all associated with family and they do just fine, but there are many of them who come and they do complain of feeling lonely and it's hard to make friends with Icelanders. And Icelanders, I have to say this, and many people who are Icelandic in the comments, you can talk about your own experience if you want, but a lot of the times, many of them have grown up with the same people and they stay friends with those individuals. And that's kind of like their close knit group. It isn't that they wouldn't be friendly or nice to new people. It's just maybe the relationship would not have that same deep connection, or maybe they wouldn't invite you to hang out with those other friends because they've got like their own inside jokes and, you know, special connection, basically. Like, I don't know how else to explain it besides that. So it is fascinating, in my opinion, to step into a community that is like this and know that your interactions, for the most part, might be limited, especially if you're coming as a person who isn't either cohabitating with an individual like boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever you want to call it, married, all of those things. Okay, so being Black in Iceland. Some people ask me, like, how has your experience been as a person of color? I've done a full video on that. And I'm just mentioning this just because I think it's just helpful. In the description box, you can look at that video. And have I experienced much racism? So personally, I have not. I have not had this over, people in my face saying nasty things. Of course, the staring thing is never easy, and I think I've gotten used to it. In fact, sometimes I just stare back, right? And it's like, and I don't know why it's usually like older men who are just like who stare longer. But sometimes we've had staring contests, and it's nothing like of malice or anything like mean. It's just like you're looking, I'm looking, we're all looking, right? And I find it. I literally sometimes I try not to laugh because it's just kind of funny to me though. And I also have experienced, with the staring, I think I talked about this in one video where literally someone was driving and she turned her hair, like her head, all the way around to be staring at me. I was like the only person on the block, and I was just like, this is dangerous. And it was like, well, I look different, and it was something that I just decided like I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it. It's no big deal, whatever. But it can be hard, and you don't know why. Like meaning you don't know if someone's looking at you, if they don't smile, you don't know if it's out of like um, they're just curious, which I think a lot of Icelandic people are. Like that's my conclusion as this point is that they're curious, and a lot of the times the staring is, "Hey, I might recognize you," and that part is. And someone says they might feel uncomfortable. I did feel uncomfortable in the very beginning. I felt uncomfortable for like years until I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna stare back, or I'm just not gonna care. I'm just gonna walk, like whatever. I'm just gonna walk away. But it can be a little off-putting in the beginning, and it's hard to explain that to people who say like, "Oh, this happens to other places." But if you've never experienced it, it doesn't matter if it happens to other places. It's happening to you right then and there. Your feelings are still valid, and it's still how the experience is for you. So I try my best to like, acknowledge that it's my feelings, and I also realize too that since nothing has happened to me and people haven't been like nasty to me or anything, that it isn't coming from a place of being mean or anything. It is a lot about curiosity, and maybe they think they have met me somewhere before. I don't know. So do they sell soul food in Reykjavik? I don't think so. That's one of the things I miss from the United States for sure, is vegan soul food. um okay, winter. So I made a video about winter, my winter routine, and I absolutely recommend looking at that for anybody who does get winter depression, because I did have that for a couple of winters here, and I really had to work a routine out for myself in order to figure out how not to have that in Iceland because the winters are so long and dark. So yeah, it can be. So just keep that in mind that this might happen, and it might happen to you if you live anywhere where the time changes and the days get shorter. But in Iceland, it's more extreme. I totally get that. So just FYI, I have a video about that. I think I put it in the description, and I didn't, I will try to make sure that I do, but I recommend checking it out. So some people do, including people who've lived here their whole lives, have gotten depressed, and it wouldn't be terribly surprising, people being on antidepressants. So people are helping each other out in the comments. So thank you for that. And a lot of Icelandic traditional food are, yeah, fish related. So I am, are there a lot of vegetarian dishes? So I'm actually, food is coming up right now. So, and oh, in Germany, they're also known to stare. I can confirm that in 98% of the cases, just curiosity. Yeah, about looking unusual. It's kind of rude, but yeah, it is. It's one of those things where it's like, they're just used to doing it, and I come from a place, especially in New York, you do not stare at people, right? Like that's asking for trouble. So that's why it felt uncomfortable to me, because from my personal life experience, we were just taught don't do that. and like, don't feel like you feels like you're initiating some trouble or trying to ask for trouble if you were just there. And here that's not how it is. So learning cultural differences too helps you a lot. And okay, food. So I'd like to know if seafood and organic foods are abundantly available in Iceland. Seafood is definitely abundantly available, meaning like lots and lots of fish. And then I've heard in a group that I'm in, which is kind of random that I'm in this group when they're talking about food because like none of them are vegans. Which is okay. And yeah, I will talk about my hair. Don't worry. And so in terms of the seafood, like fresh fish and the seamonger, I think he does like, squid and whatever else. So there are different types of seafood in Iceland, but I think you'll mostly find like like the fish part is going to be the most abundant. And maybe other people can mention about this. Is it hard to find fruit? Like it's like with lots of question marks. Sorry, it just made me laugh. So no, it's not hard to find fruit. It's just what type of variety of fruit do you want? Because it's gotten better for sure over time. And I have had my times where I've picked fruit and I was like, mm-mm, this is not good. I think this has gone bad. Or this is like almost on the brink of going bad. There's also a company that's doing like a co-op, a food co-op that ships in food that I've heard is really amazing. I've not tried it. It's not inexpensive because that is Iceland. Iceland is an expensive place for food, just FYI in general. And as a vegan though, like I've not had a hard time finding food. And there's actually an all vegan store called Vegan Booth, which I love going there. But that is my splurge spot. I do not go there every time I go for like shopping for food because I would have a hard time. Like I would be basically always like, end up buying things I don't need just because it's so enticing. Like, it's like for me, it's like going into a Whole Foods because Whole Foods has so many varieties of things, and there they've done a really great job of adding variety, even fresh vegetables and I think fruits, but definitely fresh vegetables. So you can find there's in Iceland like they grow tomatoes and cucumbers, carrots, and mushrooms, different varieties there. They're not always available, and sometimes you have to wait if they become available if you only want to buy Icelandic things, which sometimes that could wait can be very long, or you have to buy imported foods that are, you know, vegetables and fruits. So yes, here, but say for instance, you go to somewhere in the United States or another place where they have just way more variety, you'll notice that, oh yeah, they don't have this special type of fruit that I like because it's Iceland and they don't really have the capacity to fulfill that need or people aren't requesting it enough or whatever. So variety can be hard to come by to a certain degree. And dominant cuisine. So this has been mentioned, of course, like the fish, but there's also lamb, chicken. A lot of people eat chicken here, veggies, potatoes. People like Icelanders love their sauces. They love their hot dogs, cheeses, things like that. That is a really big part of Icelandic cuisine. And then, of course, there's other aspects that have been like the rugbrauð that I mentioned, and putting like butter on that or, excuse me, cheese on that. So it boils down to like the initial variety, meaning like back in the day, like fermented foods too. There are some people who really like eating like the boiled, that's not fermented, but the boiled sheep's head. Like that's still something people really like eating. Rauðkál, which is pickled red cabbage. I really like that. I think it's pretty delicious. And then there's like this interesting, especially on holidays, association with like peas in a can by this company called Ora and like corn in a can as well, But I think that's just because traditionally, like that's how they were getting it, and so on holidays you'll see people like opening up these cans of peas and serving it with their roasted lamb, or. So yeah, I find that pretty funny. And what's the difference between an expat and an immigrant? Aren't you an American immigrant in Iceland? Yes, this is an interesting question. I looked it up a while ago. So I believe immigrant, if I'm thinking about this correctly, is like came to move somewhere permanently. And I've often have used expat or immigrant in exchange. Like I don't, for whatever reason, don't feel like one has to be uh, better or worse. I use expat because so many people use the word expat when they move to someplace. So I know that it would get individuals like, understanding right away. Whereas immigrant, I think a lot of people think of when people are moving permanently, but like, to, like you think of Ellis Island. That's, I'm sorry, my brain's just like trying to remember the name of the island, Ellis Island. When you think of like immigrants came there, it's like they were fleeing from wherever, or coming for a new opportunity. And for me, there is this mix. Even though expat doesn't necessarily have to be that you're staying in a place permanently, but I have that. I'm fortunate that coming here was a choice that I just made because my husband's Icelandic and I wanted to be with him in the country, right? Whereas sometimes I think immigrant, even though it doesn't have to be the case, can be associated with having to have moved there, like you, as if there was something that forced you to do it that was out of your control. And yeah, expat sounds so final. I mean, immigrant in essence is the one that's more final. I think if I'm remembering correctly from the definition, but they're interchangeable. So you can call me expat, you can call me immigrant. It doesn't. Ooh, I hit the mic again. It doesn't bother me whichever way. So okay, how difficult is it to be vegan in Iceland? It is not, in my opinion, difficult to be vegan. Now, it really depends on what you are looking to have for food. So some people who are vegans, and I do not judge about this at all, they want more imitation meat things. Now, if you want to have that, that's fine, but it's more expensive for sure. And you'll find that unless you have a lot of money to spare on that, you're going to end up being like, this is too expensive for me because you want something similar to maybe the food that you used to have. I like to go for the more whole foods approach whenever I can. So having things that are like kale and beans and things like I've even made my own seitan out of powder before because I wanted to have something that was a little bit more of like this texture that resembled meat, but I just wanted to kind of make something interesting out of it and it has a ton of protein also. So this is and fruit, yes, Lisa. So absolutely. And it's, fruit and vegetables. That is the for me when I think of my life here and getting my food, how I like associate my food, whatever. And maybe I'll do a video. And I thought about doing a video about how to buy vegan food in Iceland inexpensively, so that people who do want to come or people who do like meatless Mondays or whatever, that they can be able to feel like it's more affordable for them because it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be expensive in many places that you live in comparison to what is considered expensive in the place that you live in. That is key, I think, to mention. And is there enough of fresh produce? Affordable? Yeah, like I said, kind of depends on what you consider to be affordable. I should make an only Icelandic ASMR. That'd be hilarious. There have been people who've thought Gunnar needs to do ASMR because he has a very like soothing voice. So okay, so someone's putting an expat just means a person living abroad. It's used by colloquially these days. She's both an immigrant, a citizen, and her expat. Yeah, so there you go. Thank you very much for adding that. And the foods, okay, so someone asked about where to find good food. Now, that is, I think, important to know because not every place in Iceland has food that you might find to be delicious. I know I wouldn't say I'm picky, but I am selective about where I'm going to spend my money. I want it to be worth it because going out to eat here is expensive. So I do not want to feel like I am going to get something that is subpar and I paid $20 for it, like that's not happening. So places that I've gone that I like, so vegan only places. So Space is one of them, which is really good. Loving Hut, if you don't get things that are really deep fried, that place is good because they are a little heavy on the oil there. There's a place that's not currently open, but I hope they open up again, and it's called Vegan Nice. And their food is really good, but also they have just a great message, and they're part of Gorkurin, meaning they're located in Gorkurin, which is like this very inclusive space that's a bar, and I've just always enjoyed going there. And these are kind of more like easier fast food places to go to. Elturog East has really good crepes. There's an app called Vegan Iceland app, and there you can check what is on the menu that's vegan in different restaurants. For Indian food, there's this place that's like the East Indian restaurant or something like that. I can't remember exactly the name, but their food is good. Now that's more of a special, like you're going out to eat a special occasion and you're willing to, pay some coins. And that can happen actually in any. Goodness and I have gone out to different restaurants, and thank you and hi to different people who are coming in. Have gone to different restaurants and have had like 3 or 4 course meals, and they've catered to me being vegan, meaning like maybe they didn't have everything on the menu that was vegan, but they were able to do that. So it's very vegan friendly here, very keto friendly as well for those who do that. Not vegan keto friendly, which is a thing, believe it or not, even though people might think that it sounds like a disaster, meaning like difficult. So is there a McDonald's? There's not a McDonald's in Iceland. It closed many years ago because of being expensive after the economic crash. There's a whole story behind that. I love your videos and podcasts. Thank you. How would you compare Icelandic drinking culture? Ooh, compared to US? Interesting question. I've actually never really thought about that. But hmm. Well, I mean, drinking is definitely a thing here and that people do, but a lot of people pregame here. So when you think about when you're in college, for those who did do this in college, I know everybody's the same, but when I was in college, first of all, I was drinking underage. I mean, let's just be honest. But a lot of the time, even when I was of age, when we were drinking, we would pregame because it's like we didn't have a ton of money and we did not want to go out and, spend whatever amount that maybe we had from part-time jobs or money from our parents or whatever to spend. So, in Iceland, there is some of that too, and it happens because it's so expensive to drink here. The price of alcohol is heavily taxed, and if you're coming in as a visitor or even as an Icelander, they do this. Getting alcohol in the duty free is awesome awesome in comparison to buying it in a regular store. And I say regular store, but the stores are actually they're managed by the government. So the government has these stores called Vinbudens, and they set the price for alcohol and whatever else. And actually, like alcohol companies can't advertise alcohol necessarily. I think it's interesting that you can see, like, in the US you'll see Budweiser, like, no problem. Whereas here you might see an alcohol company with a billboard, but they're just saying like cheers to the year. Like they can't actually sell their alcohol. It's just like a reminder that they're there. Like it's just this, like, just FYI, Viking is there. Maybe this might make you think to buy them. But drinking wise, people definitely get pretty drunk here, and I know people, there's, like in other countries, there are people who are alcoholics. Pretty expensive habit for sure. And maybe it curtails the amount of drinking, the price potentially, but I'm always surprised when I go out and I'm like, wow, there's so many people around. Icelanders are drinking. It's so expensive. But that is, if that's important to you and you put it in your budget, yeah, I'm not sure how else to explain the drinking culture, like if it gets extreme or not, because in New York, it really varied depending on where I was going. And I've seen similar behavior in New York as I've seen in Iceland in terms of people drinking. Not that it's been any less here because of that. And Gunnar and I are not big drinkers. Like we enjoy it every once in a while, and he's even less than I am. So for the two of us, it's like, we'll go out, but we have friends who really enjoy having wine with dinner and going out to a restaurant and having wine or whatever else. But you might find if you go out to a restaurant, drinking would be just as expensive as your food. So, FYI. Are there a lot of people with drunk driving records? I don't know, but the fine, it's pretty heavy, and the consequences, and it's also much lower, the alcohol amount in your blood. I mean, it's like in this case, it's like zero tolerance for it. Whereas like in the U.S., I think you have, depending on the state, you have places where it could be 0.08 or something like that. Um, so excited to see you doing live. Thank you. I'm well. And okay, so are there a lot of people? Yeah. What is duty free? Duty free is in the airports where you buy goods. That's an area in the airport where you can get it for tax free, duty free in essence. So you get a much better price on those goods. Yeah, there are places in Iceland that I haven't been to that are higher on your list. Yes, the Westman Islands. That is very, very, very high on my list. And I'm hoping actually to go very soon. So, housing costs. This has been a question that many people have put into to the chat over there. So, I'm going to talk about that now. And as an expat, what would a comfortable cost of living be if renting a one-bedroom apartment outside of the city? So, this was an interesting question because it's like, what is comfortable for you, right? And I have to preface that because I know people have budgets, but I'm just gonna give you an example of Gunnar and I. In this case, it was a two-bedroom apartment, but still, I'll just give you an example. We had a actually okay. The first example I'll give you was Árbær, which is in the Reykjavik area, but it's not in downtown, so it's less expensive. And we were renting from a through a family member. Their coworker was not they were not going to be there for the summer in their apartment, and they actually had a big apartment. And we only stayed there just for my first summer. And had 4 bedrooms, only one bathroom, which I don't understand why they have so many bedrooms in one bathroom. But they also had like 2 floors. It was really nice, and we paid, I believe, it was like 250,000 ISK at the time, which is around 2,000 a month. And I mean, that was just for a few months, and it was like, oh, that's fine, no big deal. And not a big deal, like that's no money, but it's like just for this summer, that's okay. And it was really nice, and the view was really nice, and it was like, wow, this would be, amazing to stay here because first of all, it's a ton of space that we didn't really need, but also like the price wasn't terrible in downtown Reykjavik. If you were paying 250,000 for one bedroom, that would be, that would not be shocking to anybody. Let's just put like that. So if it's outside the downtown Reykjavik area, as you get to the neighborhood, so we're in Mosfellsbæ now. And when we moved to Mosfellsbæ, before buying our apartment, because we own our apartment that we're currently in, we were renting. And we were paying 150,000 a month, and that's around $1,200 a month that we were renting. And that was through a friend that we had found, Gunnar's friend. And so that for us was was way, of course, way more comfortable paying 2,000 a month because you have way more money that you have. And so for me, I would ask like for yourself, you ask for like a one bedroom. What does that mean for you? What does comfortable mean? Like you can afford your groceries, of course. Do you like to travel? Because being able to afford to travel would be important. So it can vary. My idea actually is to have a video where I give people like ideas of what it's like and what these spaces look like. So if people are interested in that, definitely let me know in the chat because I would love to actually go to physical apartments and be like, for 1,800 a month in Reykjavik, you could get this. Because I just personally feel like that would be helpful for you to see that. And also just for me, I would love to also just like go, I'm not really house hunting or apartment hunting, but I get to go and, film in them or something. So that's just an idea that I have. Okay, so okay, people. I love how people are saying like when they have to go. So I thank you to all those people who have been, saying things and stuff like that. And okay, I'm just looking at some of the questions over here in the chat. I did a couple of vacations in Iceland. I'm now expat from yes, living in Costa Rica. Nice. So since most of the floors are wood, if living in an apartment on a bottom floor, doesn't the noise of people walking above you drive you nuts? And okay, so it depends. Not all of the houses are just purely wood. A lot of them they have concrete. And our house, for instance, the apartment that we own and live in, we can't. Well, we're on the top floor to be fair, but we also can't hear our neighbors, and we've never heard complaints from them. I do know of people who live in wooden houses where it's creaking like crazy. And yeah, that's not for me. I prefer to be in a sturdier concrete building where the sound is much more insulated, I guess. Maybe that's a good way of, describing it, just so I'm not worried about hearing people. Because just like I don't want to hear you, I don't want you to hear me either. I want it to feel like we can live in harmony if we're going to be in apartments. So, yeah. Um, do women have easy access to reproductive health services? And I'm thinking this has to do with, of course, having birth and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely way better here than in the United States in that going for checkups, giving birth, I mean, like the cost is practically nothing in comparison. And that part is amazing to me and sad at the same time, too, just because it shouldn't be that this, which is a a very difficult process, meaning like it's a lot on a person's body, on their health, and needing for both of these beings that are coming into the world to be safe. It shouldn't be that it's so expensive for that to happen. And in the US, I've just known about, you know, horror stories of individuals or costs, practically bankrupting people because they gave birth or something and they had complications. Like it's insane. So, yeah. All right. And I'm going to move on now to hair. Um, oh yeah, finding apartments. So I have also, in terms of finding places, I have in the description box a list of resources where you can look for housing in Iceland. And there's like a place specifically that's a Working in Iceland website, and they go through all of these things just because they know that people, need this information. And there's also a new hotline in Iceland for foreigners who live in the country, excuse me, who need support and understanding about different services. So excuse me, I wish that was available to me when I first moved because, like I mentioned earlier in the live stream, there were so many things that I didn't know, and there were so many things that I wish I had been explained to me just in English, basically, that someone was really versed in, so that I didn't feel like, what's the name? Or I have to go where? Or I have to pay what? Or, I'm like, I just don't know any of this stuff. And it felt very confusing. And my husband was coming back from living in the United States. So a lot of this stuff for him, too, was also like learning along with me or having to remember or try to remember or get information for me. So I think that is changing because there are so many people who live in the country who are needing to have access to this information, but it's not always been easy to find. And I'm talking about like renting places, unless you're on Facebook and you know to look on Facebook. Most people don't know that. And yeah, so that's just kind of a tidbit there as well. So I'm gonna have some water. And by the way, this is a cup that I designed, and I'm just like randomly showing it to you because I think it's so cute. And this says Allt sem Íslenskt, which on the other side it says all things Iceland. So I just designed my own all things Iceland cup because I thought it would be cute to have. And yeah, I love it. I'm just wanted to share that. So okay, hair. Do I do my own hair? Yes, I do. And are there any places where I get my hair done or black hair salons? I've never seen a black hair salon in Iceland. And hopefully that changes if the demand is there for it. But I basically do it here at my house. And then sometimes when I go back to New York and I feel like I want to be pampered, I go to the hair salon, which is nice. And what's the national hair scene like? Can you find products? There's a place called Afrozone that I mentioned earlier. And someone says, "Do I hear merch coming out?" Yes, it's a teaser. It's a teaser of some merch, but I also just want to show you because I'm really proud of it because I did it myself. So it was one of those moments where I was just like, oh wow, that was much easier than I thought. But yeah, I do want to like if people are interested in that, of course, it's not like it, but this one's just for my own benefit, and I've been using it for a couple of months because it's because I just want to make sure it actually works well and I can wash it and put it in the microwave and all that stuff. Do you ever get we don't do black hair line? Ooh, I've never gotten that, but then I've never tried to go to a hair salon here. I have so what is her name? Claudia. Yeah, I'm just remembering the story. So Claudia Ashani Wilson, who I did have the interview with, is a human rights lawyer. She didn't have the issue with her hair, but it was like her eye lashes. They were like how black eyelashes are so oily or something really weird. And it was like maybe it's just her eyelashes, but to say that it's black eyelashes is weird, right? Like, and she's a human rights lawyer, and this was not the best person to to do this. So, yeah, okay. As I like, yes, drop the merch, sis. Okay, don't worry. Some stuff is in the future. I'm trying to, put things together. But yeah, so that was a circumstance where it was just like, I framing it in this way was insensitive and unfortunate for that place because they didn't I'm not sure, I can't speak for them. I'll just say that. I'm not trying to make any excuses, but I think this like assertion that, because it's hers that might be this way, it has to be all Black people this way. That's a very strange thing to say. So, but if you're coming here and you know, are have hairstyles that are different than the people who are here, like, you know, a lot of people here bleach their hair, get it straightened, whatever else. That's not something that I do. I mean, granted, my hair is colored. Yes, I know that. But I'm just saying, like, I don't get it done the same way. Be prepared for bringing your own products. And AfroZone does have products, but not the ones that I use in my hair, because one thing with locks is that it keeps a lot of the product in for a long time, so it can make buildup and then the hair can look really dirty. So you have to be careful. And I just don't use certain products, and that's just how it is for me. So that's you know, on the hair thing. But I do know women here who've gotten their hair braided and have gotten extensions. They've gotten, you know, just different hairstyles. So it exists, but it's kind of more off in like a one person's like, hey, you know, I do this thing out of my house. I think it would be really nice if a person was able to have like a spot in a salon where they can cater to people, because there probably would be enough individuals who would keep that person going if they felt like this would be a long-term thing that they could rely on. So, um, someone asked, what is my hair color? So my hair color, if you're looking at the hair here on top of my head, the darkest part is like a dark brown. And as it's going down, I have like this ombre kind of color going on that I really like. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue it and just let it grow out the color. I don't know. Do I find wigs annoying, hard to do? Um, when my hair was loose, I did put on wigs because I thought it was fun. And not like wigs that were very like normal looking. I have actually still have one, I think, in my closet that's a red wig that has bangs. I love it. It's like really really stark red, and it's almost like a, you know, Fifth Element type of do, and I just think it's the coolest look. And it's for me, it was like part of a costume. But some people were like, "Oh, I really like that," and so I sometimes just wear it out to like go places. Not now, my hair's too like much now, but yeah, I don't necessarily find them annoying to do, but I have a relatively big head, so it can get pretty tight on my head. Okay, now I'm going to go on to about Icelanders in general, because I've gotten a lot of questions kind of like just in general population and understanding. So, how would you describe Icelanders in general? And I made a little list because I thought it would just be helpful. So, we mentioned earlier curious. So, like the staring part is part of it, but also like inquisitive. And that part I can relate to. I'm very inquisitive too. There's some dark humor here, and probably the Icelanders in the comments, they could relate to this. But it wouldn't be surprising if, like, you know, like, and I think Icelanders talk about this with Finnish people, that they often like will laugh at the part of a movie where, you know, something horrible happened, like a death or something. And so there is this kind of like um dark humor that is not my humor. And also about, no, I don't know if this will demonetize me or something, but like body parts, like male body parts that get said a lot. I'm just trying not to get demonetized. So the only reason why I'm saying it that way. It's not that I am prude or anything in this way. So there's a lot of jokes about like tippe is what a male body part is in Icelandic, and it's just, it feels like it never gets old. A lot of, not everyone, but a lot of Icelanders like to make these jokes. And when I've gone to parties, it didn't matter if it was male or female, or whatever. People were just making lots of jokes about it. And I was like, really? Okay, interesting. You know, that's just, maybe I'm just missing that. And very welcoming as well. Like I've mentioned, I've felt very welcoming here, and taking sometimes like to get a little bit like to warm up to you, because, and not that like I said they're welcoming, but like, you know, getting to know individuals who are outside of their groups and whatever else. I think many Icelanders who have lived abroad already and had to be in that experience of being a foreigner in a foreign land of individuals they didn't grow up with or whatever else, this, they seem to often relate a lot to individuals in Iceland. At least I'm pregnant with the eggplant. They relate a lot to people in Iceland who are new to the country, in that they can totally get it, you know? So, yeah. Yes, penis jokes are common. That's what I was basically saying. So, family oriented, absolutely. Like this is a huge part of the culture, is being family oriented, and I love that. And it also can be isolating for people who are not in the family, like I mentioned earlier. And Icelanders too, and this is an in general thing. I think it's fair to say that they know Icelandic. I'm saying, of course, they know Icelandic well. They know English well. A lot of some Icelanders, not a lot, but there are a decent amount who would say like they feel like their English is not that good, and they speak to you, and you're like, your English is way better than my Icelandic, okay? So, and it's like because many of them grew up watching shows that were in English, and like, even the kids now they're on YouTube and they're playing video games and stuff like that. So a lot of people understand English well. So that's kind of an in general thing. And then this like traditional adherence to traditional things is fascinating to me because like I mentioned about Christmas traditions and kind of doing these things that happens around the country with people almost at the same times or similar circumstances. Would I ever be interested in expanding our family? Yes, I am interested in that. I am also just kind of allowing myself and you know, Gunnar and I are allowing ourselves to enjoy the time that we have before expanding our family and becoming chaotic because I've seen families and I personally get to babysit often kids. And that was another thing I was going to mention. Someone asked me about Icelandic. I think I didn't answer that originally. Is like how often in the day am I speaking it on average? And because we're doing this, you know, all of March thing, I'm speaking it a lot. But also, I babysit, and my husband and I, we babysit my sister-in-law's kids. So she has four young kids. She has five kids, but one of them is 16 and out of the house, you know, doing stuff. Whereas her four are 11, 10 or 11 and under. Like the twins are 5, Theo is 6, I believe, 7, maybe 7 now, and like 10 or 11. And so it is to the point where when I talk to them, I have to speak in Icelandic. Like that's what they know, that's what they understand. So in that way, that's also been really helpful for me language wise. So do you ever get tired of when you're having a baby question? Sorry, I have to laugh. So, it I think it can be hard because I don't have an exact answer. Like there are some people who they keep it private because they are trying and maybe it's not working for them. Whereas for me, it's like I just don't have any news for you. It's just it's not a priority at the moment, right? So if it would be different if, you know, I was just like sensitive about it. I'm not. I'm just more about like we'll see, you know. I was Yeah, you were there in 93, 94, 96. People left babies outside. Yep, people do that. Are saunas a thing as in like Finland? They're definitely way more a thing in Finland. Not that I've been to Finland, but I interviewed a Finnish woman, Satu Ramo, and she talked about that. She's, you know, being Finnish, loves her saunas. And they have them in Iceland, but it's more about going to the hot tubs here. And do you ever visit New York City? Yes, I mentioned that earlier. I do. Just in case you probably missed it, but I'm just mentioning that if people are watching this later on, they'll see that I had mentioned it. Are there many different political parties? Yes, there are different political parties here, and that's always really interesting too. Is in Parliament, and I've done a full podcast episode about it. I had to I remember I was like I almost said YouTube video, but podcast episode about that. So I might have to come back and put this into the description in terms of if you want to like hear about different political parties. Of course, new ones can be formed, but just in terms of like how parliament works in Iceland and how political parties have to form coalitions and things like that. It is very different than in the United States. And when people ask, I always say I am children. They usually laugh and go on. I mean, we are the babies for each other. Yes, that is true. So, okay. Um, Let me just go on with this. How often are Icelanders, as a rule, towards welcoming and embracing other cultures in society, inclusive and exclusive? So yeah, okay. I've I'm not going to say it varies, but of course by person it will, but in general I feel like with the curiosity, inclusivity takes work, right? So it's like, yeah, you might be curious about different individuals and of their culture, but you probably don't understand how to incorporate that culture in a way where you feel like, okay, Icelandic culture is still being honored and respected, and so is theirs. And I say that meaning this is over the years, like because I do the Icelandic News Roundup every week on my Instagram stories, and this is something that has come up about like diversity and being more inclusive. So it's something that in society is happening and is being talked about, and I think people are trying to work on, but it takes work. And that's the first thing I said was it takes work because it isn't just like, oh, you're here. Great. We're so happy to have you. You know, like every culture, I think, especially one like Icelandic culture for so long that has been kind of, just them. And then there's an influx of new people. It takes time to adjust and understand and learn and implement different practices for including people. So this is really fascinating to me to kind of see how that's happening here. And individuals, are you a fan of Björk? I like her music. I don't know all of her songs. I think she's a fascinating character, just as like an individual, uh, in terms of her creativity and really being able to like from a marketing perspective, she's great for that because she knows how to get attention, and she's okay with like being different. That part is just so interesting to me. So I appreciate her. I can't say that I'm like a huge fan, but I do definitely appreciate her, and there are some songs I like. So are Icelandics fond of dating? Yes, they are. They definitely date a decent amount, and people have families. Those sometimes those parents break up and then they date and whatever else. So Jules, who are your front runners for Drag Race UK and Drag Race USA? I actually haven't been watching this season. I feel terrible, but I have to catch up. I'm like, ugh. So I don't have a front runner. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that. And what do you think of Icelandic music? So I love different artists who are Icelandic musicians and singers. For instance, Valdimar, I had the opportunity to see him sing live and also like meet him afterwards, and he's such like, a lovely person. And there's just so many different like Paul Oscar, like there's just so many different people, and I'm trying to like off the top of my head, I'm never the best at recalling music names, like artist names, but those are the ones who originally just like popped in my mind. But I have a Spotify playlist that I go to that have Icelandic music that I listen to a lot. So, and yeah, okay. So I'm just gonna go on here then to more of these questions over here on my phone. So people who've been seeing me look over here, it's because my phone has a bunch of questions on a stand that I have it on. And are locals accepting of expats? Do you often get assumed to be a tourist? Oh, I answered that earlier. And someone I think had mentioned, oh, Dade, yeah, Dade is really cool. There's so many though. I mean, it's just like this is not even a like list wise, like those very few that we mentioned, there's so many amazing female artists, male artists, people who are non-binary. Like there's just like it's just runs the gamut the amount of talent in this country of such a small amount of people, and I appreciate it. And that's also something that is really motivating me to just tap into my own creativity. So okay, so Inky Björk said she heard a good explanation about why we stare at strangers. Okay, I'm looking forward to hear that. Uh, yeah, the good likelihood that we know the person. Yes, I mean that's for sure. I think I hope I mentioned that because that was essentially something that I was getting at. But for coming from a different culture where staring might be considered rude, it's hard if you don't know that you assume something else. Um, do a lot of people use cars and have cars? Yes, a lot of people use and have cars for sure. And transportation wise, like I have a car now, but I took the bus for the first 2 years I lived here, and it wasn't terrible. I mean, my job was only 10-minute bus ride from my house, though. That's really helpful. There are people who have to take multiple lines and whatever else. And some years ago, like the bus system was a pain in the butt. It wasn't bad. It was just there'd be times where the bus was supposed to show up on the time it was supposed to and it didn't. And then you're like, crap. This is I've been waiting out here. It's cold, it's rainy, it's whatever. And also, I've had a few times where I was standing at the bus stop and the bus driver for some reason I guess didn't see me and just went on by, and I waved my hands, and then they stop in the middle of the road and I'm like running to catch the bus and I'm just like, what is going on here? So having a car is freedom wise has made it much easier for me because now it's like when I go out for interviews or if I'm have a work project or something like that, I don't have to rely on maps. But if I lived in a downtown area, I probably wouldn't have a car because I could just walk to most of the places I need to go to. And Mm, it says I'm just asking. Yeah, you always have to put this like disclaimer. They said they halted the COVID vaccines in Iceland due to blood clots. Oh, that's about AstraZeneca. So not all of the vaccines. This is specifically AstraZeneca, and so yeah, a lot of countries have done that though for AstraZeneca. Do many artists who are in Iceland? Oh yeah, there's so many artists who. Sorry, that wasn't the question. Okay, on to this next one. Do Icelanders are Icelanders as materialistic as U.S. citizens tend to be? I'm gonna say yes because they like to shop, and I think I mentioned this on the habits of Icelanders I picked up over the years. It was like when I go out of the country to visit somewhere, I take an extra suitcase to go shopping because it's less expensive to go shopping, usually other places to get clothes. So I often do that. Yeah. Oh, and there's a nice list there. So thank you of artists, of Icelandic artists. And where are most of the expats in Iceland from? So I think I maybe you weren't here earlier when I mentioned it, and that's totally fine. But if you end up rewatching this, you'll see that a lot of them are from Eastern Europe. A large portion of the foreign nationals in Iceland are from Poland. And yeah, that's in my opinion, is a really interesting perspective I'd love to have on the podcast and on YouTube as an interview because there are different experiences, for amongst Polish people for sure. Are there bike lanes in Iceland? Yes, there are definitely bike lanes here. And is there any food that's hard to find? Yeah, I would say like because I'm vegan, this is more of something that I think of from that perspective. It's changing a lot. Like for instance, Just Egg, which is a scrambled vegan product that I would splurge on just because every once in a while, maybe like once a month, I want to have what looks like scrambled eggs, That is expensive in Iceland for sure. I mean, it's expensive in the United States also. But that recently came here. And so there's like, different foods that are being developed and you have access to in the United States. But in terms of a whole foods perspective, I would say different varieties of like tropical fruits and things like that where they're just not in demand here. And so you just won't find them. And then like you don't find watermelon every time of the year. Even though I went to Costco and there was watermelon there and I was very shocked. But like if I go to Kronan, I'm not gonna see watermelon in Iceland right now. And so, as a 19-year-old, would I be able to rent a car in Iceland? And also, how is public transportation there? I have to look into that. I think. Yeah, I'm not going to answer that because I'm not 100% sure about the age limit. Maybe somebody else knows. Um, but public transportation is okay. I mean, it does the job for individuals, but I think at this point, because of Reykjavik and different parts of the country were made for people who have cars and not as many people having cars. Like as the population has grown, more people have cars and then there's a little bit more traffic. And traffic is, minimal in comparison to New York City traffic, of course. But for instance, driving around has been a time saver for me. I do also try not to drive if I don't need to, just because of course it's polluting. And one day I'd like to have an electric car. But when I was taking the bus, like my time to get places more it was like tripled if I were taking the bus rather than driving. Maybe even more depending on how I was trying to get to a certain place if I had to change buses and whatever else. So what are the common core values of the communities? So are they isolationist? And no, I would not say Icelandic people are isolationist. They do have agreements with other countries. I wouldn't say that they're like, trying to mingle in other people's business too much, but there have been times where, say, things were happening in Poland because there are big Polish communities here where the government would say something if it was like about abortion or something else, it's like, and I'm not getting into these topics and we don't have to have any discussion of them in the chat, but the whole idea is that when it comes to relations and having a voice, I don't think all the time Iceland is always saying something, but there are times where saying something is meaningful even though it's from a really small country. And so kind of seeing itself politically in the world is super helpful in my opinion, and I'm proud to see when Icelandic government officials speak up about things. Oh, thank you so much, Elisa. I'm so glad you're enjoying this. And I gotta go get some watermelon. Enjoy your watermelon. Okay, someone's saying for car renting it's usually the age of 25. Okay, there you go. So my skin looks amazing. Thank you. It's a bit of, my moisturizer, and then also I've been really warm, so I've been sweating. It's a sweaty glow that I got going on. I appreciate that. And what spurred my interest and passion in Iceland. So, as I mentioned, some people might have seen my other videos. If you haven't, that's totally fine. My husband is Icelandic, and so that's my initial kind of introduction into the country. But then I just fell in love with the nature and how rich the culture is here, and how interesting it is, and how good I have felt living and being here. So for me, this has been such an eye-opening experience of feeling like a part of me changed in a positive way being and living in Iceland, that I got the chance to blossom. And I'm really grateful for that, because, I think living somewhere else, especially outside of where you grew up, can, for many people, there's watermelons and Hagkaup. Okay, good to know. Thanks, Brentis. See, but I don't go to Hagkaup all the time because, again, I'm trying not to spend as much money. So my go-to stores are usually Bonus and Kronan, which sometimes Bonus and Hagkaup, I think they were owned by the same. They might have, you know, similar products, but I don't remember seeing watermelon and Bonus, not recently. Um, but yeah, it's just for me is in terms of like how I feel here has made a big difference, and sparked my interest in being even more interested in the country. So okay, I'm gonna continue on with just some of these more questions. We're almost done with the questions. We're at 2 hours. Oh my goodness. So this was not an expectation to go this long, and I appreciate people who are all hanging out with me. And I hope that you're finding this useful. But we will be, finished with this soon. But continue to ask questions for sure in the chats. And does it snow a lot in Reykjavik? Is it heavy at one time, or is it just small amounts? It depends. Like this winter, we've had basically almost no snow. We had one day it was like, really snowy, and then it just felt like, huh, this is weird so far. And in the north, sometimes they more so, I would say it's more consistently has snow in the north from what I've gathered from being here over the years. But it will come and go. There will be storms that come, and then you'll get snow, and then it might get warmer and melt away, or just become ice and things like that. So it definitely varies. From someone moving to Iceland from a country with mild winters, would you recommend getting winter gear? Yes, beforehand, or Icelandic brands? Are they better equipped or designed for the Icelandic weather? So many. Oh, thank you, Lisa, so much for the super chats. So, just in terms of that question, so many companies have really elevated what they do in terms of clothing. So it doesn't just have to be Icelandic brands, but for sure, I mean, some of them are really good. I like Patagonia, and I also like Zoan. I don't have a lot of 66 degrees north stuff, so I can't vouch for that, but my mother-in-law got me a great Zoan jacket that has served me well. So Lisa asked, okay, good question. Do you know if they have any type of exemptions for COVID vaccine to enter Iceland? If you've already had COVID, I've heard talk about this, so don't quote me on this 100%. I'm sure in my stories, like my Icelandic news stories, I'll be able to update people when I've gone through the news more thoroughly. But at the moment, like they're keeping it to like if you have either the vaccine, or if you've had the virus and you have a certificate to kind of show that you have antibodies for it, or that you've had the vaccine. And then the other alternative is being in quarantine. So getting tested when you come to the country, or having a test at least minimally 3 days before you come, a negative test, tested when you get here, 5 days in quarantine, and then another test. So that would be, the exemption of not having to have a vaccine, but that's not open to US citizens, meaning like into people outside of the Schengen area and whatever else. It's the what's open to people outside of the Schengen area and is this whole, vaccination certificate and antibody certificates. So, I love how everyone's like, there's watermelon in different places. Thank you. Obviously, I need to go more to more stores. um, okay. People are helping each other out in the comments. I love it. Are there trains? I said, there are no trains. There are no trains. I actually plan on making a video about some of this stuff because I think it's so fascinating. But yeah, there's not one yet. There's been so much talk about it, but it actually hasn't happened. And do I still knit? And what's your favorite knitting pattern? Girl, good question. Or sorry, I'm if I misgendered you, but I'm using that in kind of a more general term. But ooh, so my knitting project is in the closet. Not that I don't want to do it. I just have not really made it a priority recently. And my friend Helen is going to be like, Jules, you have to get on this. So it's one of those things I need to get back to. I like the patterns for, well, the traditional Lopa Pesa. I don't remember the name of it, the one that I picked out, but I'll have to find it because it's really cool. And have I felt any earthquakes? Yes. Not since the stream, not since the stream, but that's also because we were far enough away where we don't feel it as much as like people in downtown. So maybe some people have. Um, do I have any other Icelandic recommendations besides independent people? Yeah, I'm doing a whole like book, like I'm collecting book recommendations that I have. So I will definitely let you know about that. I'm thinking about making a video. Would you permit fans giving your present when visiting Iceland? Oh, giving me presents. I mean, you definitely don't have to do that. If you want to, I will permit it. That is totally fine. Okay, and I'm just gonna go back to some of these other questions just because there are a decent amount left and I want to make sure I get to them. So, um, do Icelanders they care for the well-being of all their citizens? I'm going to say yes, especially since the healthcare system, like I mentioned, it's universal in that like everybody has healthcare, but it's not free, and but it's heavily subsidized, so it's affordable, and I think that's really important and family-oriented, absolutely, very much so. Um, if Gunnar and I have children, do we want our children to be dual citizens of Iceland and the United States? Yes, we do. So that is for me. I think it's very important. I believe Gunnar feels the same way, and it's identity wise. I think it's also really helpful for them because when they want to go and visit the United States, it's almost like you don't feel like you're, even though might be foreign to them that they don't live there, they have citizenship. It's like that is part of them and their home, and to explore if they want to live there one day and do whatever else. So I've had many people on the internet say that the air in Iceland is very clean and pure. Is that true? It is very true. The air is very clean. Except when we have issues with it like being really still days and people are using nail tires and the road just is getting like torn up and really dusty and you get like all this pollution in the air. But other than that, I mean like yeah, the air is very, very clean here. And are people in Iceland conscious about environmental preservation and do they prevent nature and do they protect nature enough? This is an interesting, kind of complicated question. So, do Icelanders care? Yes. And I've been reading some articles about this, funny enough, about awareness regarding pollution, not pollution only, but like climate change and the environment and making changes like in their everyday lives. And I'm saying this, I'm included in this because I'm living here, but I think that it was in Icelandic to, probably just Icelandic people who live here, the survey that was done. But when it came to flying, which is an act that pollutes a lot, most Icelanders said they weren't willing to change their behavior there. And I think, like many people who fall into a category similarly, like they want to have access to different places. Maybe it's less expensive, especially if you live in Iceland, you can go to like Spain or something. It's way less expensive to vacation there for many people. And so it's like, an option that gets taken away from them. So I think many people aren't willing, hi to people who are coming in, and aren't willing maybe to sacrifice that. And so having other options in the future, like I don't know, I'm just randomly going to say teleportation or something, that can be able to help with that because obviously that's a polluter. And then car wise, a lot more Icelanders, just even as of recently, are buying electric cars. So you can see this like trend happening of individuals wanting to not pollute as much here. And plastic bags, being banned and individuals having to either use paper or this type of material that mimics plastic that is biodegradable and like in landfills it breaks down. So yeah, there's just a lot of changes happening, and then the government has also come up with different initiatives and plans. But I think it's like 2040 they want to be carbon neutral, which is it's a big goal. So it's happening in on the ground here, and there's a lot of shifts that need to happen, and I'm included in that too. I'm not saying this is like them over there. It's like no, I also have been trying to change my habits and things of that nature. So yeah, electric airplanes, that would be pretty cool. And diet weight loss culture. Everyone in Iceland seems so fit. What is the diet weight loss culture? I mean, in a lot of places, people get caught up in trends and things like that nature. So I wouldn't say everybody's fit, but in comparison to like obesity rates, when you look at them in the United States, it isn't as bad. But that has been changing because there's like a lot more fast food and foods that contribute, and people like kids, for instance, not going out to play as much outside, playing video games. So you do have shifts in behaviors. And what city in Iceland has different races and is diverse? Reykjavik is for sure the biggest. It's the only city really, like the official city. I mean, we call like Akureyri the capital of the north, but it's not really like that big in comparison. So Reykjavik, but I've heard that in the West Fjords, I think it's I can't remember the name of it, but that they have this one small town has like the most diverse amount of people because they were like a different amount of individuals from other countries that moved there. So, but it's super small, like 200 people in the town. So, are there wild animals like bears, wolves? There are no bears or wolves in Iceland. There are Arctic foxes. Those are considered native to Iceland because apparently they came over, I guess, during the Ice Age or something. And then when lands and continents were breaking off and shifting, they were still here when settlers came. So I'm just going a little bit through this. And okay. Questions though, I apologize. It's going through the chat can be a little bit like just monitoring myself. And I still have some other questions here. I've heard okay, not yeah, I've heard that there's a reforestation plan going on in Iceland. Is that true? Absolutely. I put a link to the reforestation efforts society. I don't remember what it's called exactly in the description box, so you can check that out. I've been to like Thorsmork, where some of that work is being done, and then just like different places around Reykjavik as well. I remember in one video that I did, someone thought that behind me, because there are a bunch of trees, they're like, that's not Iceland. And it's like, yeah, it is. I mean, there are trees here. There's just not that many of them, but there are areas where there are trees, and they're like small forests and things. And you might have heard that, very typical Icelandic joke, which is, what do you do if you get lost in an Icelandic forest? And I'm gonna see if someone knows it. So Icelanders or people who live in Iceland, don't answer this, but what do you think happens if you get lost in an Icelandic forest? What should you do? And okay, next one. If you marry someone from Iceland, how do you take their last name? So the last name is like child of, yeah. So this question is really funny. Are there wild horses? Before I go into this other one about the last name one. So as far as I know, that all the horses that are in Iceland are kept, meaning like they are owned by somebody and they're not just like running wildly. So I'm gonna say no on that one, just from my understanding and having read and like met horse owners and stuff like that. So stand up. There you go, Steve Williams. So okay, yeah. Okay, so if you're lost in the Icelandic forest, all you do is stand up. It's a joke. So if you marry someone from Iceland, okay, the last name, you do not take a last name in Iceland, meaning that that is not part of the culture. And I love that. So traditionally, obviously, in many places, this is the thing where it happens. I don't have any judgment about that. People can do whatever they want with their names. I really like my name. I really like how it, and I'm sure Gunnar really likes his name. He's had it his whole life, and same with me. And I do know people here who have taken the last names of their husbands. I even know a person who took the last name of his wife. He's Icelandic and his wife is from the United States. Super interesting, but I think that's pretty rare. So normally it's like the wife taking the last name of their husband, and I know people who their last names are, let's just say, Ingolfsson, and it's a woman. This to me is interesting because the way that the names are set up, and some of you probably know this already, is that it's the name of your parents. So traditionally, or I should say most often, Icelanders take the name of their father and they put either son or daughter, so son or dottir at the end. And that's just how it's been. Some people do it where they take their mother's name. And I think both is pretty interesting. So for me, being Jules Ingolfsson, which is Gunnar's last name, would be bizarre because in my mind, just because if I think of like literally what it means. But like I said, I don't judge that other people do it because that's part of their culture and that's something they really wanted and it was important to them to do. I get that. I just don't feel connected to need to do that. And I remember when I was younger thinking to myself, like, I don't want to have to change my name. I really like my name. So I'm very happy to know that in this culture, I'm not judged for it. I feel like in the United States, if I didn't, there would be potential family members or individuals who would be like, but why? Like, don't you feel like you should have to? And it's like, no. And it's here. I could be like, I can say to people like, oh, in Iceland, they don't do that. And it's just like, it shuts it down completely. Like, we don't have to have any more discussion about it. And it's just fine. So, yeah. And Icelanders who marry each other, they don't take or change their last names. So you can have children in the family, right? Say if you had it's male, female, well, the parents in general are going to have different last names, and then the children of those, because it doesn't matter if it's male or female, but the children of those individuals, they then have different last names too, if you think about it, like because of the dotter and son part, and what happens is that I've heard people have issues and they go to like the airport and they'd be like, oh, we're all a family. It's like, well, how come your names don't match? Your last names don't match. So I think that might be the only downside to it. Um, would you consider making a video about what it takes to visit Hornstrandir? Yes, absolutely. Totally. That is on my list as well. And have your family visited Iceland to see you in Gunnar? Yes, they have. What last name do children have? So, like, if you haven't seen or heard that, then someone right above you, Hoof Beats, is it the non-binary version? Avoid sun. Yeah, I'm not sure. I actually need to find that out if people who are non-binary do it something different because I've heard needs to address that, but I just don't know how people do it currently. So yeah, so Magni thought is like there isn't, but I'm having fun imagining one. So there you go. So I guess maybe it just needs more creativity in order for that to become a possibility. And it would be great. I'm sure there's non-binary people. Yeah, there are definitely non-binary people in Iceland. And Haun, so there's like the different pronouns of like Hun, Han, Thoth, which is like it. It's not much of a so Hun being she, Han, he, Thoth, it, and Haun, which I've heard of before. But then I also heard from my Icelandic teacher that there are different variations coming up. So I think all of this is being developed, of course. Like language is a fun thing to play around with. And I think that's also something that hopefully people will continuously be open to in Iceland as well as like in other places because language doesn't have to be this constrictive thing. Like we have the ability to be able to, you know, mix things or come up with new words and people still be able to understand. And that's what it's all about, it's just communication. So is the marriage rate low in Iceland? So when I first got here, I was so surprised at the amount of people being like, "Oh, so what's your boyfriend's name?" Like the automatic assumption was that I wasn't married because many Icelanders don't, at least they haven't, in the past. I think that more people are getting married now. At least it feels like there's a trend of like more individuals getting married, but a lot of people end up getting together and not like getting married right away, having children and doing whatever, living together and maybe getting married later on because legally it's beneficial for them, like in terms of assets and, rights and things like that. But there are so many people who just assume like it's just a boyfriend or girlfriend and not that you're married to an individual here. So I don't know the actual rates of it, but I'm curious. Actually, I might look that up just to see because I would be surprised if it was like higher. I definitely don't think it's as high as like sometimes in the United States. So yeah. Have I eaten haukat? I have. I tried it many years ago. So this is fermented shark for people who don't know. I tried it so many years ago, 6 or 7 years, so many, 2013 actually, I think. Yeah, my first time visiting, and it was horrible for me. No offense to anybody who really likes it. It's just it was too much. So okay, other things here. Okay, so this is more the miscellaneous category where there's just like a bunch of different questions that didn't really get grouped into anything. So somebody asked this before in the chat and it was like, did you ever have a YouTube social media channel before? What motivated you to start one? I did not have a YouTube channel before All Things Iceland. I mean, I had one, I think it was just my name. I had one video about going to the Polyglot conference. So I need water. Hold on. Swallowing. So okay, and I made a video about like what it was like for me going to the Polyglot conference. But at the after that, like it was just like that's when I started kind of experimenting with video on YouTube, and that was awesome and scary for sure. I already had the podcast. So I started podcasting in 2018 about Iceland, and I was like, I feel like I'm more live on video. I love talking just audio. It's fun, but I feel like my facial expressions and like my just natural way of being on video would come across and just visually giving people the opportunity to see Iceland more and stuff like that. So for me, video felt like a natural progression, even though it was pretty scary. So it was just more about like taking all things Iceland from an audio only medium to bringing it to video. That's what inspired me to do this. And have I ever felt unsafe? Troiste asked that. I have not felt unsafe in Iceland. I still am a person because I'm from Brooklyn, because I'm from Bushwick, and if I've ever walked home at night, hi, for people coming in. If I've ever walked home at night by myself, I always watch my back. I always like notice what's around me. And I'm not expecting anything to happen, but it's like I don't want to be caught off guard. You know what I mean? So that is just a natural thing that I grew up learning. And in Iceland, I practice it in terms of just being able to feel like I'm, safe in my own perception of what makes me feel safe. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's, yeah. Uh, and they'd like me to interview with the lighthouse tender. Tender. You are not afraid of heights. Oh, I'm not afraid of heights, so that would not be a problem. Someone asked me if I'm gonna have children. Possibly. And oh, am I ever gonna share our wedding video? So this is a funny story because wedding video wise, our we had two weddings that not everybody knows about this, or maybe you do. I don't remember if I ever talked about it. But yeah. Our first wedding was in my mother-in-law's living room. And I it was great. I mean, it was one of those moments where it's like you just really can't, you know, like truth is always or like the real thing is always just so much more interesting than fiction. So it was in my mother-in-law's living room and there were a bunch of children there. I think there were actually more children at the wedding, this small ceremony, because originally Gunnar and I talked about eloping, but my mom got wind of it and she was like, that's not happening. I'm coming to Iceland. You know? So she came for the ceremony. It was like her, my mother-in-law, two sister-in-laws, brother-in-law, and then just a bunch of children. And in that video that my sister-in-law was taking, you hear like a lot of crying. So Gunnar and I are saying our like vows to each other, and you hear so much crying of, excuse me, these little kids, and one's like, "Mommy!" Just like I was just laughing because we both were just having like, oh my god, this is hilarious. It's so cute. So that video, I don't even know if you'd be able to like hear anything, what was going on, just because of this happening. The other wedding, the bigger one, people we didn't have like an actual videographer, and it was it was kind of like a our bad, totally forgetting about this part thing because I was the one planning it, and of course goodness was helping me, but like I was also working full time and doing whatever else. So in my mind it was like, oh yeah, people will take it on their phone, so people have like clips of those, but it's not like a full video. So I don't really have like there's probably the clips that I can find to share, but it's nothing like the montages that you see of people who have like these gorgeous wedding videos that have been edited so well. Does Iceland have rural/suburban areas? If so, what are the names of these towns and what are they like? Iceland has a lot of these, a lot of suburban areas, a lot of rural areas, and it just depends. I mean, like a suburb of Iceland, like Kópavogur, right? And that's just in the Reykjavik area. It's a suburb. And then like a rural area would just be in the countryside. So once you get out of the Reykjavik area, and for the most part, that is the countryside. That is the rural areas of it. And then you'd go to like in the north, maybe like Akureyri, and you have more people, but still like a lot of these just come across as much more rural. So um, The best paying jobs. I think a lot of them are in tech in Iceland, for sure. And oh, someone says I was in Iceland. I felt super safe. My wallet was afraid. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what you need to be afraid of. And not I don't mean pickpockets. I mean is the cost of things. Pay attention to what you're buying. That's so funny. Even though the population is small, are there regional Icelandic accents and dialects? No, not really. So this is also another phenomenon of Iceland. Even though like people can get, and I say not really, it's basically no, because you don't have it like people are sounding so different like you would in the US or something with like the regional accents and dialects. Maybe there's some ways that they pronounce words that are differently, but it's not so different that it's like, oh, this is almost like a twang or something, you know? And hi, people coming in who are new. And yeah, so that part to me is fascinating because there are areas that get cut off for months from other people, like in the West Fjords or in the East Fjords, where, you know, maybe getting there by boat might be. And it's changing in some of these places, like the West Fjords, where there are roads that are open all the time. But back in the day, I mean, this wasn't the case. And it's just interesting that the way people spoke, and for the most part, they didn't develop another type of accent or a dialect. That was something I had asked when I first got here too, because I was super curious about it. Um, you talked about it with Gunnar in a video, yeah, early on that we did together. And you, someone says you need to know Icelandic if you're applying to jobs or asking that. Not every job. So I didn't know Icelandic when I started working here, and even my Icelandic is I wouldn't say because it takes me so a while to think about things. It's not to the point where like in a working circumstance I can use it, and I do and have used it and understand a lot of what's going on, but it wasn't a necessity for my job because my job for the most part was catering to an audience of English speakers, like meaning the clients might have not been English speakers, so we'd have meetings in Icelandic, but what I needed to do in my job was, you know, related to English speakers, or it's so specialized. So like being the head of digital strategy, marketing strategy for a company, and helping clients with that, like they don't care if what I speak as long as they can talk to me and get the necessary information, tools, resources, metrics, things are going well. Like that's what they care about. Like is their money being spent well? So it doesn't always have to be that case. Um, okay. Just looking to see what other questions are popping up. To Iceland and speaking Icelandic, depending on the job. Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, some people haven't weren't here early on, so it's okay. I know that sometimes it might end up feeling like I'm, you know, repeating some questions, but it's to clarify. And like I mentioned, like I do plan to make this video available after this, so people can go back and look at the different things. Do I order black hair products? I don't order them here, but I do go to the US, get them there, and bring them back. And in the summer season, is the ocean warm enough to swim in, take a dip, sunbathe? I mean, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, it gets warmer for sure. And I do know people who do it. I don't personally do it. I think it's still too chilly. But there's a place here, Neutalsvik, where you can go into the ocean and it's a little bit heated, I think, in the like the fake beach that they kind of imported. Hit the mic again, sorry about that. They kind of imported. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely warmer than in the winter. It's one of those things where it's like, it depends on the kind of person. If you like to get a little bit of a colder plunge, it won't. I don't think it's gonna kill you or anything, but it's good to go into a hot tub after. I'll just say that. Um, yeah. So Magni is just chiming in about like, while I agree with what Jules is saying, these slightly different pronunciations of a few words quickly regionalize you. Yeah. So yeah, I could totally see that for sure. If you'd be like, oh, you're from the north or something. Yeah, I have actually heard that. So people have and do sunbathe here. By the way, I've done it on very few occasions. So yeah, okay. All right, I'm gonna try and wrap this up because we're going on 2.5 hours. But a couple more questions. So someone asked about Icelandic legends, stories, and folklore. On my Patreon. So people who are part of my Patreon community, every Friday I do a folklore Friday. So I talk about a lot of folklore over there, just as an FYI. And there are, of course, definitely lots of cool legends and stories and stuff. So I would encourage you to check that out if that's something that you want regularly to get access to. I'm not so sure how much I would be doing it on YouTube, but we'll see. So has there been an influx of Americans relocating there to escape the States? It's harder to do that. So that's not really happening in this great flood of people. So individuals can't just come here, as I mentioned kind of earlier, but I'm pretty sure they would if they could. And I have learned how to knit. Someone asked me about this as well. And I am working on a sweater, and working on means it has been partially done. And it will be done sometime in the future. I'm not worried about it. Affordable clothing, reasonable and affordable clothing, like in the types of deals typical in the US. I don't expect to find deals typical in the US in Iceland. However, you can get a break sometimes where someone's having a big sale and you're like, whoa, this is like way less, expensive than the normal price. But, and then there's outlet stores too. But for the most part, I honestly just go outside of Iceland to buy my clothes. Just gonna be honest. And this person says, I didn't mean to speak for you, but no, that's totally fine. No worries, no worries, no need to be sorry. And yeah, okay. People were talking about music, which is pretty cool. Do I have any special habits or interests that are unique to Iceland? I wouldn't say they're unique to Iceland, but they were sparked by being here. So, hiking for sure is one that I wasn't doing it in New York. It's not like I'd never been hiking before, but it was just not something that I would regularly do. And I also cycle more and not outside. Like I mean, I do it outside in the summertime, but here I cycle more here because I really like kind of getting up like a good sweat and stuff like that. I'm sweating here under this light, but that is something I do, and that has more to do with combating um, winter depression and kind of just keeping my body moving. So I find myself being a lot more active in Iceland. And I tried cross country skiing. Oh man, it's so much fun. So that's an activity that I really would like to get more into. And someone wants to know from the previous list, where can Americans get a loba pizza? I always recommend going either to a secondhand shop. That's another thing. So secondhand shops, I've gotten like a really great loba pizza there, but also like there's clothes there that are more affordable as well. And then also the Icelandic Knitting Association. I think that they are an awesome place because they employ different people around the country who are knitting these sweaters, locals. This is awesome. And what is your favorite Airbnb or hotel to stay in when you staycation in Iceland? So right now, my ultimate favorite is the Panorama Glass Hotel or Lodge. Yeah, Panorama Glass Lodge, which I've made a reel on Instagram about. This place is amazing. Half of it, and it's like called the Panorama Glass Lodge because half of the lodge is glass and it has, of course, supports and stuff like that. But if it's like nighttime and the northern lights are out, you'll be able to see that. If you're like laying in bed, I was able to see like the stars because it was a clear night. And they do have blinds that come up, shades that come up from the floor, so you can have privacy. But it's a very private area anyway, and you also have your own hot tub. Like it's amazing. It is hands down like my favorite place that I've stayed so far. But I also need to explore some other places. I've stayed in some Airbnbs that have been really nice. That was kind of what I did mostly when I was visiting Iceland in the beginning because it was so less expensive than hotels. Of course, now with like COVID and everything else, things have changed in terms of cost of hotels. So you could find good deals, and it's something I just need to explore more. Yeah, okay, the flea market for sweaters is supposed to be cheaper. Yeah, it's true. If you go to, I totally forgot about that because I don't go there that often to Kolaportið, which is downtown Reykjavik, and snowboarding. I have tried snowboarding. I like skiing more than snowboarding, and it's more because I just have more experience with it. And with snowboarding, I was not doing a very good job, and I just need to do it, of course, more often. But I literally was like feeling like I was gonna break my wrists. So it was more of my failing in falling correctly. I love ice skating though. That is, and it's not something I do necessarily here in Iceland, but I have done it here in Iceland and I absolutely love it. It's a sport that if I thought about it more, I would do it more often because it just brings me so much joy. Um, yeah, thank you. Okay, no worries. People who I love when people say like they're heading out, and my pleasure. So we are going to be wrapping up soon. I it's just like I've been so excited about answering all these questions and also interacting with people in the live. This has been so much fun. I can't even explain to you how like awesome it is to be able to do this. And I also am probably gonna go straight to bed after, like clean my face and go straight to bed because this is it's a lot of energy, but it's so much great energy exchange. So I appreciate all of you too who are taking part and chatting. Someone asked me what type of lotion do I use. I use CeraVe, basically, is the type. And what's it like to send kids to school as an expat? I don't know. I don't have any children, but I don't know. People seem to be pretty okay with it for the most part here when it comes to sending their kids to school. Some people send their kids to international schools. That's something I'd have to look into once having children, or learning a little bit more about it because it isn't something that I just need to worry about in my life. So, um, and okay, and then these are just basically like someone asked this question. This like made my heart kind of like sad a little bit because their question was, is there any prejudice towards Chinese expats here? And given what has happened in the United States recently, I totally understand, that question and like where that question might be coming from because it is horrific what happened. And in Iceland, that is not what is happening, meaning like I'm not getting that sentiment of like individuals being treated this way. At the same time, it's like, has there been any prejudice in the past of people who are Chinese? I've heard stories, and what I would like to do is go the note to whoever's saying that. What I would like to do is every 20 minutes I'm saying it's true. I'm not the best at wrapping up. That's a good point. Maybe we need to work on that in life. This is why probably doing lives is harder for me because because at least with the other videos, I know I can wrap it and then just be done. But being called out in the chat, it's totally fine. I find it hilarious. But just going back to the other topic, so I have heard in the past of individuals having ideas about Chinese people, and this is before COVID or anything else, meaning like, some people thinking that Asian people and all Asian people being Chinese if you're visiting Iceland, for instance, um, then that of course is very upsetting to many people because they're very different individuals from different places, and that I heard something about like some Icelandic people saying that Chinese people would learn to drive in a simulator, so they didn't know how to like drive on the road. So like I want to bring on a person who is from China, who has lived in Iceland, and there are people who are like this to talk about their experience because, and you're welcome to people saying thank you and good night. Uh, because I do believe that this is an important thing to talk about in the light of what's happening right now. I'm obviously not going to be reaching out to people because I feel like there's so much emotion that's going on, in reaction to what's happening in the United States and the fear and in other places. So that to me is just really heartbreaking to hear, because I think people are just really looking for like, will I be safe? And that was one of the questions I asked, for myself is like, would I be safe coming here? And we all deserve to be able to have that reassurance for sure. And someone's asking me, oh, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying. And Jules, do you have anything you'd like to say or comment that you feel like you don't talk about much? Thank you. I don't talk about much. What do I not talk about? I feel like I talk about everything, but mm, I'm not sure. It's hard to say because a lot of my life I'm sharing different things in different platforms, so it's hard to know what exactly I don't talk about. Maybe yet I haven't talked about my Icelandic learning journey. That I think is something I'm preparing myself to talk about more because it's very personal for me, and I want to give people more of like the insight and realistic look at like how it's been for me, because like people have seen that video that I've done about me just speaking in Icelandic, and there was a lot that went behind that video. Like it's all me, meaning like I wrote the text for it in English first, and I wrote it in Icelandic. And then I sent it to my Icelandic teacher who corrected my grammar, which was so helpful. And then he even went the extra step and was like, he read it out for me in a recording, just because one thing that's really difficult, at least for me, is that there's not a lot of commas used in Icelandic. So when you have a sentence that kind of goes on for a long time, knowing where to break, that doesn't naturally feel like it happens for me. So it was really good to get like the rhythm down. And then I just did the video. Are you telling me to shut up? That's not nice. I mean, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be. So, for me though, the thing is that like Icelandic and, learning, this is something that is important for me to, yeah, to basically talk more about, but I have to get myself to a space where I feel ready to do that. So, okay. And yeah, there are someone asked about, is it safe for young tourists and is April a good time? Yeah, that person is rude. Uh, Whoever you are, Brian McCommon. That's not nice to say at all. No one's forcing you to be here for sure. And this is a safe space for everybody. So, feel free to show your way on yourself on the way out. Is it safe? How safe is it for young tourists? It's safe for everybody, in my opinion. There are a lot of people who hitchhike around here and who, not now because of COVID, but just in general, they like do different things that maybe in other places might be a little sketchy. But in Iceland, meaning like, hitchhiking and whatever else, for some people, that might be a pretty scary experience. So, okay. So the majority, I think I've answered literally all the questions that I have. The education system, I have a link about that in the description below. So, okay, Brian, even if you're just messing, it's hard to know. So it's good to put like, I don't know, sarcasm or something, because otherwise it's like literally what I read into it. So, so, okay. And I am so grateful. I'm also reading comments at the same time. Because it's so interesting just to kind of see people interact in the chats. Like my mood's not going to change based off anybody else's, because I want this to be a fun experience. I hope that it has been for everybody who has listened. Like I mentioned, I will put this up on the as a regular video, and I'll try my best also to put timestamps of the different sections. So thanks again. Hopefully in the future I'll be doing some more of these lives. If you have requests for live topics, like topics to do for live videos, or just for video stuff in general, feel free to let me know what that is, whether it's through some type of social media, email, whatever else. So thank you so much to everybody. I hope you all have a lovely day, evening, whatever time it is where you are. Have I visited the upper western part of Iceland? Yes, I have. In the West Fjords, it's amazing. Definitely go there if you can. And thank you so much to everybody again. And I will definitely see you in a video coming up in the near future. If we have an eruption, I will let you know. So, may I ask how early the roads are drivable without snow? Well, easy. Oh yeah, they're very easy without snow for sure. Um, yeah, if you come in sometime, you'll have no problem for sure. And so very interesting. What if you have a criminal record? I don't know. Maybe it depends on the crime, Lisa, regarding that. But okay, I'm gonna go. When is my birthday? June 16th. I'm a Gemini. Okay, I am gonna go now because like it's been almost 3 hours, and there's someone else gonna come in and be like, she said that 20 minutes ago. It's true, I did, probably more than 20 minutes ago. So thanks again, and everyone have a great evening, day, whatever it is. See you next time.